So there are repercussions for other people depending on what someone says with regards to this particular thing. And so my fundamental question is, words, I mean words generally, but let's just take men, male, female, he, she. Who and where does the truth lie? We back.
What's up, dude?
Happy Thanksgiving,
It's been a long
everybody.
time since I saw you.
Yes, we can reminisce, but we have to get into it before people drop off.
Oh no, our watch time.
Our watch time.
Panic.
So, do you want to start? I have a ton
Go for it.
of stuff. Dude, where do I even begin?
We've been talking like 2 weeks.
I'll start with revisiting something we discussed last episode, which was the college student loan forgiveness. I think that there were a handful of people that disagreed, which I understand, because as I was reflecting on the way that I described it, I was like, I didn't. My take was not as concise as it could have been, and I think that one of the things that helps clarify the most what I'm trying to say, as I was thinking about it, is that as soon as you started talking about debt cancellation or forgiveness, it's like, of course, like I love forgiving, like I love canceling, and it made me think of that book where they talk about the death tax versus the estate tax, because what's actually happening with student loan debt cancellation is student loan debt reassignment. It doesn't go away. It doesn't get forgiven and we don't kumbaya. Somebody else pays for it. Now, you can make an argument that should be borne by rich people because they can afford it. And you can make an argument that society will benefit if its younger workers are not saddled with a ton of debt and that it won't wind up being a zero-sum game. But without getting too deep into it, because we did discuss it last time.
I thought this was my whole thesis, was if you're going to spend, I'm making a number up, but if you're going to spend $2 trillion to help the populace of the US, there's just better uses for it than paying people's student loans. Because that's what debt forgiveness is. It's the government paying for your student loan.
Well, this is it. It's not the government. It's other people. This is the point that I don't think we made as clearly as we could have.
But I'm just saying, like, every time the government pays for something, it's other people.
Yes, but I think we forget that. I think, and especially when it's like a loan forgive, it's like a government loan and we forgive it. It's like, no.
Yeah,
Your
sure.
neighbor
It comes
who didn't go to college.
Everyone who pays taxes
Yes.
gives the government their money, and then the government uses the populace's money.
Yes.
What I'm saying is, like, the government does have that money. Let's say there's no tax changes, no raises, no lowers. Okay, so they have a pool of money, and their goal is to help the United States of America and the people that live there. And they have $2 trillion set aside. And you can pick anything that this goes to. I wouldn't pick paying off university loans. It just seems completely arbitrary. That doesn't take into account people's situations, where they're at in life, what got them there. So that's my whole argument. It's like, well, let's spend $2 trillion to make people's lives better. But I wouldn't do this. I would do it based on something else that seemed more helpful and fair.
Yeah. No, we don't want to talk about it for too long unless other people want to comment. We can dive back into it. But I was just reflecting on the way that I talked about it. And I was critical of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for saying that people just want others to suffer. And then somebody, which I understand why they thought that when I later said I paid for it, that was me saying I suffered, therefore you have to suffer. And that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that...
Wait, this is how we started the whole conversation. Was I said that AOC said the thought process was I suffered, so other people have to suffer.
Well, I don't think we were as clear as we could have been,
That's
obviously.
how I started. I said this is not the case.
Yes,
that's a straw man. That's not a steel man.
But then we said we did it and didn't
I didn't say we did it.
Or I said I did it and didn't make extremely clear that it's not like it's a hazing thing where where I was hazed and I want other people to be hazed because I was. It's I don't want to pay for other people's decisions.
Let's say
because it's
there's
a
a
zero-sum game and you have to reassign the debt.
Let's say there's an upper middle class guy who goes to school, gets student loans, and doesn't take into account that his career will have to pay for them, wants to be a writer, tries to become an author, and now he is stuck with his loans for 40 years because the pay that he gets as an author is low relative to the loans he took out. There's a lower class person, someone who's born in poverty, let's say, who decided to become a laborer of some kind, a plumber or a carpenter,
Tradesman,
so that they didn't have to get student loans, but they were born into a worse circumstance. But now, because of their decisions, they don't have student loans. Why would we help the guy whose parents make $1 million a year, who has the financial safety net, who chose to be an author because he'll never have to worry about hunger and not help the person who made decisions because he had the foresight to think about student loans.
Well, you don't even need to bring in, I actually think it confuses the argument where they came from. But the second part is this person had the benefit of going to college. Like they need to pay for that experience. Now, it's totally reasonable. And Jake Tran made an interesting video on it that was about the college loan business and how it started. And I think makes a very good point that the reason that college prices, and I don't know if this is 100% true, so you can fact check me, but that he asserts the reason that the college prices are so high is because they're backed by federal loans. And you've artificially inflated the demand for this thing. And I think to myself, I'm like, no one was going to give me a loan to go do this. And if they did, they'd want to know what major I took. It wouldn't be, they wouldn't just hand out loans willy-nilly to the kid who took a philosophy major.
If it ran like regular businesses, you'd go, okay, so here's your background. You have a high SAT score, you have good grades in high school, you want a loan. Okay, where are you going to go to college? Where have you been accepted? What's your major? What are your career goals? Okay, you're going to Harvard to do econ. I will loan you $200,000. Okay, you're going to a college that I have not heard of, but is extremely high priced because it's on the beach in Southern California, and you want to be a sculpture major.
Yeah.
I will not lend you I might lend you $10,000. I'm not going to lend you $200,000. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like you would take each person case by case based on their circumstances, their collateral, their family wealth, their future earnings projections. But you don't have to do that when the debt is just inescapable. When you can't go bankrupt to escape it, when you can't die to escape it. Student loans are insane in that way.
And while it would I would like that because I relate. I was 17 and had no idea of debt and what it meant to owe $100,000. And then I found out very quickly. And they're also like, don't worry about paying it. This is the other thing. They let you go to grad school and defer. Thanks, guys. I appreciate that. One more year, $50,000 additional dollars that I owed. The way that mine worked out is I had a scholarship. So I actually, for my first 4 years, was only racking up like $13,000 worth of debt. That was with a full academic scholarship. They force you to live in student housing, which is ridiculously expensive. You're living in a tiny little dorm room with another person in the same little square, and it's $1,300 a month in the suburbs of Washington, D.C., which is just a crime. In any event, but the fact that I was able to defer my loans out a year encouraged me, and in fact, I elected to take out an additional $50,000 of loans. So it sucks. And there's this predatory lending that is occurring to people that do not know what they're getting into. I can 100% relate to that. But I don't think the answer is to reallocate that debt to somebody that didn't make that decision. I'm not sure what the answer is, but it also, I think, includes subjecting colleges to market forces in a way that they're not. They are also, again, I have to double check this, but in the Jake Tran video, he talks about how colleges are tax exempt. Their endowments are tax exempt, all of this stuff, and they call them endowments as opposed to hedge funds, which is really what they are, because these are investment vehicles for these colleges, especially the biggest ones that have billions of dollars. I did grad school at University of Virginia. I believe when I graduated years ago, they had like $9 billion under management, and they called me as soon as I graduated for more money.
I don't actually know what they use the endowments for.
To make more money. I don't know, but to what end?
I actually don't understand why colleges do have hedge funds, because they do. They call them endowments, but they're just hedge funds, and I don't really understand why. What they're for.
Well, it's not to reduce the cost of schooling, it appears, or to it's unclear to me. So in any event, I don't want to spend too much time there because we already talked about that, but just the one thing that I was thinking about is that book, the death tax versus the estate tax. It elicits very different responses from people. And I think rather than debt cancellation, it should be called debt reallocation or debt reassignment.
And the last thing I'll say is if the plan that took the $2 trillion ended up distributing some money to people who then did use the money to pay off student loans, I'm fine with that too. I'm not saying that that's the worst use of money. Just that we should take into account that there were people who did avoid student loans so they wouldn't be put in a bad situation. And it seems weird to not consider them for the $2 trillion.
Well, this is what happened with the, what is it? I always get PPP and PPE confused. When the initial round of government stimulus was given, we have purposefully set up a business where we don't spend all of our money, where we do not run on razor thin margins and take all of the excess and blow it into ads, because in the event of a crisis, we didn't want to sink.
Mhm.
We were actually penalized for that when this stimulus went out because we could have benefited from that riskier growth. And then, oh no, we can't pay our employees. Well, guess what? You get a loan, interest-free, potentially forgivable from the government.
Mm-hmm.
So what all of these, again, we know this with corporate, but it's also true of individuals. There are times that bailouts are necessary because the catastrophic effects of it are just like, okay, well, that's economy/world ending. But what you do is you incentivize, when you bail someone out, the exact behavior that got them into that sticky situation.
Yeah.
And so I remember sitting with you and being like, we're fucking morons. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Look at us. Like we put aside, we have a slush fund of 2 to 3 months of employee salaries that we can give. If we make no money, we can pay our employees. But why? Why not just run that crazy? I could spend that on my lifestyle or on ads or on anything else, because the government apparently loves people that don't save.
Yeah. No, it's a weird thing with public companies, because if you take your money and do share buybacks, then the price of your shares go up. The price of your shares go up, you're the CEO, you get rewarded. What that means is there's entire industries that know that they cannot handle a downturn.
Airlines.
But they know that the government will bail them out if they have no money, as long as they have no money.
Mm-hmm.
So if there were a responsible airline, they would not do share buybacks. They would put money away for a rainy day, and their stock would trail all the other airlines, and their CEO would be fired and replaced with someone who would do share buybacks. And then when, let's say that didn't happen and the CEO stayed, when there was a massive crisis, they would use their cash to pay their people, but the airlines just get free money from the government to pay their people.
And this is what happened.
So there is no penalty. It's in fact, if you look at it, the incentives create exactly what you would expect, which is that it's almost logical, if you just don't care about the guilt of taking money from the government in a bailout, to blow all your money on share buybacks and drive your stock price as high as possible so that you can exit at a high price. Because if anything bad happens, the government is just going to give you money to make up for your aggressive behavior.
And when we say the government, again, it's your neighbors are going to give you that money.
Yeah, we all do. Everyone who pays taxes, everyone who pays taxes has
that doesn't own airline stock or run an airline.
We have all. If any of you have paid taxes ever, you have supplemented the income of a 8-figure CEO of an airline or a financial institution. That's what this means. And
at some level of, and some of this, I'm not anti. You've also supplemented the income of the single mother who was on a shoestring budget who got laid off and then collected a $1,200 stimulus. And that's a piece that I am okay with. Like there's financial hardship, which I and many others could look at and go, you know what, this is going to happen, and we need to make sure that this isn't catastrophic.
For sure.
But we also don't want to incentivize that type of behavior.
I'm not against taxes or redistribution of wealth, but I'm saying specifically, if the government came out and said, hey, airline industry, just as a heads up, there will never be another bailout for you. Mm-hmm. And if you guys go bankrupt, we will allow someone else to buy your airplanes for 10 cents on the dollar and run a different airline. Because people think that if an airline company went bankrupt, we wouldn't be able to fly. Like I just flew home to see my family for Thanksgiving. It's like, you couldn't do that without the airlines. But if an airline company goes bankrupt, they don't just get all their planes into a hangar and then throw TNT at them to create an explosion. They sell them for as much as they can get. So all the flights would still be the same. If we did have a government that said, hey, just so you guys know, no bailouts are ever coming your way, you would see two things. Some people would believe it, and they would start putting cash aside for the first time ever because the incentives were different. And some people wouldn't believe it. They would go bankrupt, and then they would be replaced by different airline companies. Yeah. So it's weird. If you did say these bailouts are going to stop, the system would fix itself. But it's tough because you need someone or some system in the government to come out and be like, hey, just so you guys know, the rules changed today. You've been acting in a way that makes total sense given the way the rules have been set up. But starting today, Jan 1, 2021, the rules are changed. And you'd immediately see different behavior.
If it were believed, of course.
Or not. Half would believe it and half wouldn't. And those half would be gone. The next downturn, they'd just be gone. You would see American Airlines would be replaced by USA Airlines. You know what I mean? Someone would come in. But
so you mentioned going home for COVID. You're a monster.
I got tested, baby. I got tested. I paid extra. I got tested for COVID. This is part of why I think that there's a COVID spike now. It's because people with no symptoms get tested before they go home.
Well, there's also apparently deaths, but we can talk about my inability to believe the news, which has hit complete new highs, I would say, in the last 7 days.
Yeah.
But just one thought that I had regarding coronavirus and the reaction to it is that, so the whole reason that we shut down the economy is to save lives of people that would die. And especially because it's a communicable disease. So for instance, like 600,000 to 700,000 people die every year of heart disease. They don't have to. An additional, I don't know how many 100,000 die of diabetes. They don't have to. But we allow the freedom to eat sugar and be completely unhealthy because that's a very personalized decision. Though it obviously does have effects on the number of hospital beds that are taken in any given thing.
Yeah.
Is there going to be heart? Are you trying to hop in?
Well, no, I was just going to say, which I agree with. I like that policy. I do think there should be a rule, like if you have what can be concluded as a self-induced condition, that you shouldn't get Medicare or Medicaid, maybe. Like, again, because when the government helps you, it's literally just taking from your neighbors. That if I decide to do heroin and snort sugar and I end up unhealthy, I don't think you guys should have to pay for my health.
Well, I think what you can argue, and let's say that you don't like that, is that we're better off paying for your recovery. You know what I mean? That there is, as a society, there are people that will decide to do heroin. And what will we do with them? Well, we don't want to execute them. They will live on your streets. So maybe we're all better off just going, you know what? Let's find a recovery center for these type of people to try to reintegrate them back into society.
Oh, for sure. But I'm just saying, let's say that I'm above the middle class, right? Because I understand that sometimes when you don't have money, it's not an option. But let's say that I make $1 million a year and all I eat are Big Macs, and I'm very, very unhealthy, and I go to the hospital all the time, but I pay out of pocket for all my bills. I think that's great. Like, I don't think anyone has a requirement to try to live as long as possible. And if I die at 55 with a smile on my face, like, that's behavior that I'm comfortable with.
Yeah.
So yeah, even though I think the sugar industry, maybe in the advertising to kids, like 7-year-olds with cereal is bad, I think like informed adults killing themselves with a bad diet is actually totally fine, as long as it doesn't hurt society.
So, and I'm just trying to like tease out why we have the lockdown, because, okay, people, it's not even going to be close to the #1 cause of death in 2020. Not even going to be close. It's going to be heart disease again. You know, all-time winner for the last 50, 60 years.
The champ.
Diabetes and heart disease. Sugar is essentially killing more people in the U.S., unquestioned. But we allow that, and we don't lock down the economy, and we don't block everybody because that's a personal decision. Okay, so it's a communicable disease. That's why we have to shut it down, because it's one that can spread rapidly and kill other people. Well, presumably in 2020, with the lockdowns and mask mandates and you can't go out into public, we'll see a dip in deaths from other respiratory diseases like pneumonia, like the flu, like when the cold kills people with depressed immune systems. And we should be able to track that number of people that we save in 2020. And that will be some percentage of the lives that we saved from the lockdown of coronavirus. Now, if you look at the numbers of respiratory deaths, and I quickly looked at this, it's something like 220,000 a year. And this isn't all communicable diseases. This is just respiratory deaths. There might be other ones that spread that I'm unaware of. And coronavirus right now is at like 280. So you're looking at 220. In a full year of coronavirus, maybe you're at around 350. Who knows how many lives we saved. But the point is, in 2020, we've saved some number of lives with the lockdown from coronavirus, and some percentage of them from pneumonia and other things that we accept every year. So will we in 2021 have the same percentage of lockdown restriction in order to save those lives that die every year of pneumonia and the cold and the flu? Or once this novel virus goes away, will we be completely comfortable with the fact that shaking hands literally kills people every single year? And it's weird to me that, and it's not weird, I totally get it, that part of what made us shut down with coronavirus is, of course, the infection rate and the death rate, which is higher than some of these other things. But part of it is the novelty.
Well, and I think the first shutdown, part of it was the unknown.
Yes.
Which is to say, we don't actually know anything about this. So at the time, we didn't have all the CDC data that we now have. It was just like, this thing is here. It spreads faster than any other flu. We don't know about the long-term effects. We don't know about the deaths. So we're going to lock down while we figure it out. I think that made total sense, honestly. Like, we have no idea if this is a plague. It doesn't seem like there's been an update where people dove into the data to figure out what it was, if that makes sense. We just still have that plague mindset. Some people have think it's nothing, and they think there's extremes on both sides. But no, I think the first lockdown and a potential re-lockdown should be viewed very differently. Because I think when you're in week 1 of a pandemic and you don't understand anything about the virus, you should be conservative. And I think when you're a year in and you have data, you should make a data-driven decision.
Yeah.
That's impossible in March 2020. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes that first lockdown, I agree. I guess what I'm saying is, if we accept the argument that the continued lockdowns are necessary to save lives of a communicable disease that we do not yet have immunization for, then one also has to accept that same pattern is going to persist into future years. Call it COVID-1, right? Yeah. That's the flu, the whatever. Not everybody's going to has access to immunization. Not everybody's going to do it. We have people, it increasingly affects people with depressed immune systems and the elderly. All of the same things are in place to a smaller degree. So my question would be, what restrictions that we have now, because it is clearly so important to save lives and we can't shake hands or go outside, do you want to take into 2021? It doesn't have to be the full kit and caboodle, but it needs to be proportionate, one would think, if one is principled about the attempt to save lives from the communicable disease.
You know what's interesting? I think there's a generalization that's not going to be true that I'm going to use here, which is that people in cities tend to be Democrats, people not in cities tend to be Republicans, and people who are Democrats tend to take COVID fairly seriously. People who are Republicans tend to take it less seriously. Now, there's definitely tens of thousands of exceptions to that. I'm just using it as like a high level rule because I noticed it when I went to visit my parents. Life in the suburbs is not very impacted.
Yeah.
Life in rural areas, not particularly impacted. Like if you live with a yard and a big area and your community is 10 people, let's say, you just bubble up. And even my grandparents who live, I have one grandma lives alone, one grandma lives in a community. We went and saw them. We just stayed 8 feet apart with masks. Not a big deal. You know what I mean? We just drove over to this person's house, hung out in their yard. No other humans came by because it's a yard on private property. And I talked to my, fairly old grandmothers. When you live in a city, it's impossible not to interact with people.
Yeah.
You just do. Every day when you walk on the sidewalk, someone is within 6 feet of you. And so it's interesting to me that the Democrats, who tend to be city-based, are so strongly pro-lockdown sometimes.
Are you Democratic news stations? Would you say Democrat voting people in the cities? Because my experience talking to people, my neighbors around me, is that they are not in lockstep with Democratic news stations.
Maybe that's true. Yeah, maybe it's the Democratic leaders, and we talked about this already. How they
live in the suburbs.
Well, they don't even follow their own guidelines.
No, they don't. Listen, Gavin Newsom just came out with it. Don't go anywhere. We're in complete violation right here of this order. We have people from 2 different households in a place, and this is a non-essential thing. He lives in the suburbs, man.
Yeah.
He hasn't. Has barely.
So maybe that's
had
it. Maybe
to
the newscasters and the governors live in the suburbs because locking down is
no, man. I know
not a big deal when you live in a remote area.
I know a lot of liberal people. Obviously, we live in downtown California area.
Yeah, it's the most liberal city and the most liberal
They're
state.
not into the no restaurant thing. The news stations love it, but your local people, no. There's a huge divide there. I think between what the
and I actually like this because I see it as well. So what you're saying is that the leadership are no longer representing the people's will.
How many governors live in the downtown area of their city? Or mayors rather.
So you think the mayor? So like the mayor of LA, Mayor Garcetti, he just came out with a strong.
He doesn't live in K-Town, dude.
Well, no, but let's take it further though. He has switched from representing the desires of his people to paternalistic, doing what he thinks is best for his people. But you think if there was a vote in LA, lockdown or not lockdown, you think everyone would just be like, dude,
Democratic?
Open up.
Democratic?
Yeah.
Oh my
vote.
God, it
Popular
would be
vote.
open up. It wouldn't whatever the news station said wouldn't matter. It would 100%. I would put a lot of money on that.
Okay.
Speaking of mayors, I just have to say, hilarious story about the Austin mayor.
Yeah.
who was in Cabo for his daughter's like wedding post getaway and made a video from Cabo telling people not to leave the home if they could help it.
Yeah.
It's freaking amazing. It just doesn't stop, man. The hits keep coming with this kind of stuff.
No, yeah, it is. It's so interesting. You have me fascinated by this concept. So yeah, so the leadership, the local government is making rules that they don't follow. We saw that with Garcetti. We saw it with Newsom, Nancy Pelosi, the Austin mayor.
There's a ton. There was another one in Santa Monica that and they technically, to be clear, they oftentimes are following the letter of the law. They're like, well, the red lockdown that I voted for doesn't go into place until tomorrow, which is why I went to the restaurant today because it's the last day that I can.
Right.
Which is like, well, isn't it just as terrifyingly deadly today? And aren't you just as likely to kill a waiter today as you might be tomorrow? I don't understand your lack of fear based on the way that you're voting.
Interesting. So they are putting lockdowns in that the people don't want, that if it were a prop on a ballot, they would vote against. And they themselves skirt them to the best of their ability, meaning that they don't appear with their actions to be scared of dying themselves.
They follow the letter of the law in almost every case. To be clear, like when Gavin Newsom was at that restaurant, well, he was inside, but he was in a different county.
Right.
He was able to go to Napa Valley.
He doesn't think that being in that situation is life-threatening.
No.
But he bans it for other people.
I think he would be afraid to go skydiving, which is pretty safe. I don't think his heart raced when he entered in that room. He was like, okay, here we go. I'm going to sit down now.
So interesting. Yeah. So why do we have them at all? Just a general sense that that's what they should do?
So this is the question that I asked, and I don't know the answer. Do you want your leaders to have skin in the game? When you have a general of an army, should he have a son on the front line? Is that going to make him make better or worse decisions? I don't know the answer. And you can definitely make an argument that you want a benevolent leader separate from the hard decisions that they have to make for what is best for everyone else. But that person needs to be at a level of consciousness and understanding and empathy that is really impressive. So, yeah, I mean, they don't technically have to have skin in the game, but if not, they need to be a genius of understanding empathy and systemic effects of their decisions.
Yeah.
Which I don't know who is. Like that's a tall order.
It also is funny to just watch how not corrupt. I don't know what the word is, but so I noticed in the lockdowns that there's so much restricted, but definitely not protests, political protests, and definitely not religious gatherings.
Yeah, this is so funny.
And it's just like, are we scared or not? Are we saving lives or not?
No, because it's a power thing.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like you want to make this happen, but you're not so concerned about saving lives that you're willing to upset the church or upset Black Lives Matter.
Yeah.
You're like working within a framework of like not getting blowback. And I just thought it was interesting because no gatherings of 10 or more. But if you have 1,000-person protest or 500 people in a mega church.
Well, you can't be in a mega church. Outside.
Sure.
Yeah.
Outside I'm just saying a 500.
Yeah.
People,
500 people gathering.
Totally cool.
Yeah.
Totally fine.
And we'll get out there with you. And so one of the funniest things that I'm considering is like, I like to take walks. That is now not essential. You are not allowed in LA according a walk to nowhere. No,
I don't know.
You can't bird. You can't bird. You can't walk. And allegedly, it was going to be vigorously enforced in LA County, according to Garcetti. So I take a walk.
You can play tennis.
Can I take a protest walk? Can I?
Yeah, for sure.
Can I protest that decision by myself?
Yeah, just say it's a political protest.
This is a faith-based political walk.
Well, like I said, when I listened to the news, when I Googled the news and read it, I was nervous that this was going to be a huge deal. Because to your point, for people who don't know, there's a strong, vigorously enforced stay-at-home order.
That's what
in
they
LA,
said. They
right?
just said it last night.
But then I read the full press release from the mayor, and I was like, this doesn't really stop anything that I was doing. So I don't know how much of it is just thunder.
Taking a walk. You're not allowed to go strolling. You're not allowed to get on a. You have to be going somewhere like that is deemed essential. And taking a walk, I don't think is deemed essential.
I think it is because you can go for a jog. You can just say it's an exercise walk.
Is that essential?
Yeah.
Great. What if it's a slow? Then what is? I don't understand.
That's what I'm saying. It was a lot of thunder with no lightning when I read the thing. I think it's meant to just allow them to heavily fine people that are doing things that are absurd. That you would look at and be like, okay, they're having a 40-person barbecue during a lockdown.
Yeah.
Now we can give them $1,000.
Now they're
fine.
clearly falling within this.
I think that's all it was.
Yeah.
I think it was like if you told most people, hey, during a lockdown, should you be doing this thing? Like having 40 people come hang out in a pool in your backyard.
Yeah.
Like, no, probably not during a lockdown. It's like, okay, well, before we couldn't penalize them, and now we can fine them $1,000.
Got it. Well, let's change gears. I have a lot of random stuff.
Did you see Trump's 45-minute speech on election fraud?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Was shocked because I continually, as it was going up and the views were counting, I kept typing Donald Trump into Google, and there was no coverage. Now, maybe this morning there is, but I was blown away that it didn't get picked up faster. Now, maybe that has since occurred.
I don't know, because I think that some people like CNN just said they're not going to cover it because it's propaganda, which I don't know how one defines propaganda, but I thought it was interesting that he's still fighting the election results like, hard, like with a strongly worded 45-minute speech.
Yeah. Well, where I've landed is on all of this is, of course, I don't know. I don't know if there's fraud in prior elections. I wasn't there. I don't know if there was fraud in this election. I don't know. Of course, I don't know. And the battle is over the frequency with which you can just assert claims that people really will not check. Baseless voter fraud, no grounds, absurd. The eye rolling is the best argument of the side that doesn't want him to be president. And his is just, well, we saw it in Michigan, we saw it here. It's just a volume of complaints. With like almost no one participating in any evidence-based investigation.
That was my takeaway. I was like, because I try to go the other direction because I know there's so much push from a lot of news stations to just like toss out what he's saying. So I try to listen with a charitable ear, but it was hard. He gave no context to all of his claims. So I was like, I have no reason to believe or disbelieve this. You know what I mean? Like I was tuning into his speech. I was like, I'm not going to watch commentary. I'm not going to go to watch other people. I'm going to watch his exact speech. And I watch his exact speech. And he's talking about, look, here's an evidence of fraud that normally you get this many votes in an hour.
And then a lot of people.
This many votes in an hour. I'm just saying, 100, 200, 100, 200, 100. Here's 10,000 in 1 minute.
Yeah.
That's impossible. I'm like, okay, well, maybe the system is just that they count all the mail-in votes separately because they're mail-in, they're paper, whereas the rest of these are done by a computer, and they just input them all at once. Like I have no context with which to judge.
That might happen in every state, every time, everything, and I had no idea. That might have been what happened in 2016, 2012.
Yeah, I was like, I have no reason to think anything.
The removal of context, man.
You're saying now, like, his evidence was so without context.
You nailed it. The removal of context, as I was speaking to my dad about some stuff, is the number one way to inform/misinform people. Because you're like, the government spent $1 billion on printer ink.
Yep.
And you're like, $1 billion, or it could be $1 million, and people will freak out.
And then
there's
make
these
it more
orders
specific.
of
Make it
magnitude.
more specific. Say Donald Trump is wasteful with spending, or Obama is wasteful with spending. They spent $1 billion in printer ink. And what you realize is last year they spent $1.1 billion. And the guy actually saved $100 million because he made a small printer ink adjustment.
And of course, that's happening with the death count. Okay, and they compare it to yesterday or previous. Okay, how many people typically die of respiratory diseases? How many? Like, I need something to compare this to. In a world, in a country of 350-ish million people, is 280,000 a lot? A little?
No,
it's like
I tuned in to be charitable. I was like, I'm going to really give this a shot because I had previously just said there's fraud every year. I have no reason to think there's more fraud this year, but I'm sure there's fraud every year because there's 33.
I know. Did I tell you this?
People.
I know of a case of fraud.
No,
I didn't tell you this. The guy who cuts our hair.
Oh yeah.
The guy who cuts. I don't know if I said it on the podcast. His wife took the mail-in ballot, filled it out for him, and sent it back. He didn't want to vote. He was like, I don't care. I might. That's fraud. Yes, she got 2 votes.
But here's what I'm saying. One person or 10,000 people in 2020 compared to what in 2016?
Yeah.
Like compared to what in 2012? I think that when you have 330 million people, there will always be fraud. And there's been fraud every year. There's been an election forever. Yeah. And so I have no reason to think that there was more or less this year. And so I tuned in. I was like, okay, that's been my thought process. And I've just been saying, how could anyone possibly know? The courts will decide. The courts seem to not be, they just seem to be rejecting it. So I just assume it's the same amount of fraud as every year. But I tuned into the speech trying to say, okay, let's do this. And walked away just saying, yeah, this spike could be a clear case cut of fraud or the most obvious case of how the mail-in system works that anyone has ever seen. And I have you're not showing me previous years. You're not showing me every state. You're just showing me one slide for one state. And so I can't possibly find this convincing.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a similar. It even gets worse because we often talk about how the news is untrustworthy and how it's biased. But there's a quote, I forget from who, that's, if you think the news is bad, like, what about history? Right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you think the stuff you're getting today with people that were there that can. So I was on this biography kick. I was like, I'm going to read biographies. I'm going to learn. And I had two back-to-back things. The first was I started reading one of Chairman Mao, and it was evident.
Give context for people who don't know who
Chairman
that is.
Mao was the guy who kind of, depends on your perspective, brought China into the 21st century and industrialized it, or killed 50 plus million farmers and peasants in this great leap forward / backwards. So he's the guy on
and not
and potentially. And this is, so who knows is how I felt after reading some of this, because it was very evident that as I read this person's book that they did not like Chairman Mao. And some of it I got from just asides that were unnecessary. We see from Mao's childhood experience that he at no point does he make any reference to caring about farmers. To which I go, okay, one, who cares? Like in my childhood, I talked a lot about Power Rangers. To draw any inference as to how I feel about the Power Rangers when I'm 30 is kind of stupid.
Or even at 5, I understood that there was value to every human life, but I mostly just talked about Ninja Turtles.
I didn't talk about
it. If you had a transcription of me, I wouldn't be talking about the innate value of human life.
And so there was a lot like that. And there was a lot of digs. And I go, okay, I got to put this down, because what am I going to, of course, I know what I'm going to think, in the same way that if I turn on Fox or MSNBC, I know what perspective I will have at the end of this book. So like, why even try? And then I picked up another one that was about Rockefeller. It's called Titan. And the first chapter is how he had an official biographer, and there was the biographer who wrote about him, and this person is then writing later. But the reason he had an official biographer is because the first biographer, in his perspective, slandered him and made him out to be a robber baron.
Yeah.
And this other biographer concluded that he was the guy who built America. And then this person comes, and what do? Maybe it's somewhere in between. But of course, now the people who set these bookends, as crazy as they are, now we're just going to find the middle between two people who might have been crazy. And maybe he was a pure robber baron. Maybe he was the greatest man who built America.
Yeah.
And what am I going to land in the middle arbitrarily?
Yeah.
So I had to put it down and go, I know nothing. There's no way for me to know about John Rockefeller.
Yeah.
And even if I read 6 books and I go with the consensus of 6 historians, at best, I am left with the chance that the 6 of them got it wrong. So I had to put biographies down and be like, damn, I'm screwed. I can't know anything.
You can't know anything about the present because the news is biased. You can't know anything about the past because every book was written by an author who had an implicit bias.
Yeah. And I was like, what can I read anymore?
And your anecdotal personal experience is not statistically significant, so you shouldn't make any decisions based on that.
Well,
so just don't use the news, your personal anecdotal experience, or history.
Yeah. And where I land is...
But besides that, inform yourself.
I land on anecdotes of all of these things with the obvious drawbacks that we all know.
Well, I think the biggest thing you land on is to not feel so strongly about something that you can't have your mind changed, which I think is something you implicitly do but don't often talk about. Like being willing to change your mind on almost anything is how you approach most topics.
I mean, that's how I would like to approach most topics. That's not actually true.
Most topics, unless you're talking to your dad.
In which case I have to win. Winning is the most important. So yeah, that's I think what attracted me even 15 years ago to philosophy, which is you can do this with limited appeal to real world data. Like politics matters so much, how you would get the data and interpret the data. Is coronavirus killing people? Isn't it? But you can do philosophy with very little recourse to disputed real world facts and figures, which is why I like it so much, I think. So I can jump. This is a C transition unless you have something close.
No, go for it.
Elliot Page, you hear this?
Yeah, I did.
Okay, so we got Ellen Page is now Elliot Page, which got me thinking about transgender, gender, sex. I stayed up a long time.
Yeah, I saw someone got confused on her Wikipedia his Wikipedia because they said Elliot Page is a gay man, but Elliot Page is married to a woman. So now Elliot Page is a straight transgender man.
I don't know. I was thinking of the category. So yeah, I have no that literally, I can't. It's kind of like when you're like, it's your uncle's nephew's cousin. I'm just like, yeah, I can't get
Sure.
there. Like, is that my dad? So, but what I was thinking about is gender, sex. I don't know that we've talked about this. So it seems that within the transgender thing, there's a lot of simultaneous arguments going on at the same time. You know, one of them is, are gender and sex the same? And like, is the way that people represent themselves in society and their biological thing the same? Are those binary, or do they occur on spectrums? And then I think the big one is, can you switch? You know, can you pick? Does that change at any point? And if so, is it as an active declaration, or is that just something that you are? So here's where I got to on a couple of this. You shoot me down. This is
I can't wait to hear this.
Late night thinking. Okay, gender, sex. Sure, I guess. I actually think that this is, you know, the gender is the way that you, if you have a beard or not, if you have a deep voice, if you are typically masculine, is what we define as masculine in 2020 America or whatever culture you're in. And sex refers to biological traits like the shape of your chromosomes, if you have a penis or not.
Sorry, did you say gender was a spectrum or binary?
I think that both of these are spectrums.
Okay. So you're less masculine from a gender perspective
than you.
Because of your... Okay, that's just a thing? That's like just a thing. We're all on a spectrum.
You fight, and society says that men fight, and I don't fight, and you're taller and you weigh more.
Okay.
And the timbre of your voice is a few decibels lower than mine.
Okay. Unless I'm reading a script for Charisma on Command.
Hey, guys!
Hi, everybody! Let's talk about Craig Ferguson.
And whatever, and maybe there's areas in which...
Sure.
Okay.
I'm not opposed. The one thing I'd say is people will hear this and think that masculine, if you are male sexed and cis, is good or superior in some way, which is, I think, the part that needs to get thrown out. You're kind of making a video about this with Cobra Kai.
Yeah.
I think aiming at masculine seems silly compared to aiming at like happy or good relationships or something of that nature. But
so here's for all you biologists, for all the scientists out there, biologists, feel free to go berserk in the comments. I welcome this particular on this topic. So binary. What binary means is one or the other. In binary code, every one is identical to every other one.
Sure.
Same with the zeros.
Yeah, if not, it would be really hard to code.
And what we say is, okay, well, this person is XX, this person is XY. So my question is every XX chromosome identical to every other person's XX chromosome? I have never looked through a microscope, but I have a sneaking suspicion that no, that your XYs and my XYs are different.
You're saying like the tail of the Y might be longer or shorter.
Tails are longer, the way that it's set up. So
I have no idea.
Okay, and take, you know, every penis, I know that is not identical. So whatever biological thing you want to refer to, you do not wind up with one or two options. Only when you zoom out and you squint at it, do you go, yeah, that one's XX, that one's XY. But really what you have is a spectrum.
Sorry, this is your argument for why even...
Sex is a spectrum.
Gender is a spectrum. That one seems to be people are more open to. You're saying even sex, male versus female...
Is a spectrum.
Is a spectrum.
Okay. Is a spectrum. I think everything is a spectrum. This is like the deconstructionist thing that is, you know, the Jordan Petersons don't really like as much these days. I actually don't know if he doesn't like this part of it. But what you wind up with is, you know, here's my sister, here's your sister, here's our moms, here's this. And their XXs are all over here, but they're not the same. And here's me and your dad and Justin and everybody. Exactly. And when you zoom out, it's like, oh no, there's just two. But when you zoom in, you go, no, they're all over the place. And there's Klinefelters, which is somebody in here, which is like XXY. And there's, and you know, and there's these tails that start to move in. But zooming out, it's like, yeah, if you want to make a baby, you got to pull someone from over here and someone from over here. And then even then you're not guaranteed. But any sort of definition, whether it's chromosomal or otherwise, if you zoom in enough, you will find that it is not identical and therefore cannot be binary.
Okay. What's the therefore though?
Sex is not binary. That's it.
So, and therefore, that's it. That's just like a...
I just don't, when I hear people argue that sex is binary, it seems evident to me that it's not. In the same way that like people are like, no, this couch is obviously solid. It's like, to you, it might appear that way. But if you zoom in, it's mostly empty space.
The
other thing that I always find
weird... I think this is where we're going in terms of dividing things by male, female. I think is just, or dividing things by gender or by sex or by, you know, by chromosome. I think we'll just go to the wayside, which is to say like there is no WNBA. There's just an NBA and anyone can play. And like military, we're gonna do male, female. No, we're not. We're gonna do has to bench press 185 pounds 10 times, has to run a mile in 6 minutes and 30 seconds. No matter what your chromosomes are, you can do that you pass. If you can't do that, you fail. And well, what about making different rules for different genders or different sexes? It's like, we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I see things going, which is actually going to be, compared to the traditional sense, you may find you exclude more based on gender, on accident, when you set physical benchmarks, but you're not going to be doing it because of genitalia or chromosomes. You're just going to let people run as fast as they can and lift as much as they can.
Yeah.
And you'll do less, I guess, pairing off based on genitalia, let's say. And I don't know that people are going to like or dislike that. And maybe there'll be a pushback, but I think that's the direction we're going to head for a period of time, if that makes sense.
I totally agree. Well, this is where I was kind of going with this, is that all models are false, but some are useful. So like the dichotomy of men and women is false.
Yep.
It is you. I am not identical to you. Like
Sure.
to say that there are men and that there are women, but that's very useful. It's very useful when you're like, who am I probably going to want to be friends with when I'm really young? And like, who's going to have similar interests to me? And like, if I'm heterosexual, even forget heterosexual, who are you likely to be attracted to? It's likely to be someone that is on the opposite side of the spectrum. And then of course there's gay people. And if you tell me that you're gay, I can guess that you're going to be attracted to someone on the same side of the spectrum.
You will get a lot of guesses right if you adopt this.
If you come in with a gunshot in your belly, and I need to communicate whether or not you have certain organs, I can go, that is a woman. And boom, that doctor knows right away, like, okay, I got to be careful of the uterus. And there are things that they know. You don't have to treat every single situation as totally stunning, new, and novel. That's what words do for us. But we can't forget that every word that we use it's false. It's not true. You do not ever fall into this category perfectly or guaranteed.
Yeah.
So the question that you raised is, okay, these made a lot of sense. Like, men, go fight in war. Women, go stay home. Forget if you like it or not. It's a really useful heuristic. How useful are those going forward? And I think what we're seeing...
Well, or even men in the UFC fight other men.
Yeah.
Women in the UFC fight other women.
Why?
Super useful. Well, it's a super useful... Like, to use those labels is helpful in terms of getting roughly fair matches. You know what I mean?
Well, this is one where I think, and so... I guess just wrapping that point, I think that we're going to see, the question is, where are these useful and where aren't they useful? The UFC to make sense because people, the market, will pay to see Weili fight Shevchenko. But the WNBA doesn't seem to have a reason to exist in this world where we accept that it's mostly a soup. Because, and I've talked about this, the difference between me and LeBron James is roughly the same as Lisa Leslie to LeBron James, right? With the same height. Like, she might even be stronger than I am.
And I'll try to... What you're saying is, yes, Lisa Leslie, if there was no WNBA, would not be able to play in the NBA. And neither can you.
And neither can me.
Both of you,
in any universe.
of how you were born.
Yes. I was born with a deficiency of testosterone that would preclude me from ever competing against LeBron James. And the idea that I would be expected to, but she wouldn't in this world, which I agree with, is like, is this stuff useful? I actually don't think it makes sense. Does the fact that she has a vagina mean that she couldn't play? No, it's her height, it's her speed, it's her quickness. And if she has me beat on those through natural, raw talent attributes, why can't I play against her? But more importantly, you could play against whoever you want. The market doesn't want to pay for it. That's why the WNBA needs to go away.
Is an interesting one because they have lost money every year and they're constantly being subsidized by the NBA. I think that I'm very excited to sit this one out because I think there's going to be a huge battle between cis women and trans women to figure out what the definition of a woman is.
Yeah.
Because that will have a lot of impact in the military and sports.
Title IX, man.
Jobs and board of directors, because now there's board requirements for California if you're a public company. So Caitlyn Jenner comes onto your board. She fills one of your female requirements for a board member, I assume. So then she's taking a cis woman's potential seat. You guys figure it out. You know what I mean? Like Caitlyn versus whoever spot.
Caitlyn versus Caitlyn, yeah.
Like, y'all figure it out. Because I know that I, in California, will have to sit on a male seat for a board of directors. So I actually don't.
Well, this brings us to our third question.
Well, I don't feel the need to weigh in.
This brings us to the third question. Do you have to sit on that? So I said, is it a spectrum? Is it a binary? Okay. Third thing is, what determines where you are?
Well, yeah, this is the thing that will happen if you make it easy to change your gender, if you make it effortless and just a statement of fact, and you let trans and cis be treated identical for the purposes of division, you will see more trans women in professional athletic leagues. You will see more trans women taking the seats of board of directors, and you will see people who might not have identified as trans identifying as trans for those opportunities. I'm not saying that's what's happening today. I'm definitely not saying that's everybody.
It's already started. No, it's already started.
But what I'm saying is that's in the same way we talked about the airline industries, with their incentive structure of getting a guaranteed bailout, should use all their cash for share buybacks. If you make it so that someone can get a great high-paying job by identifying as a woman, you should assume that there will be bad faith actors who do that.
Well, I want to go even further. Like, I know you want to sit this one out, but should you be able to... Okay, so I think... And tell me if you disagree. The spectrum, both sex and gender, we have 4 different... advantages and disadvantages depending on where you are perceived and where you line up that are maybe not fair in every case. Like, to me, it's not fair that I have to compete against LeBron James if I want to play professional basketball and my sister doesn't. Like, she was worse than me all growing up and she got to be on the varsity team. What is up with that? You know what I mean? I couldn't compete against the guys any better than she could, but she got to be in this other league. And I know that sounds crazy at the face of it, but if you follow this argument, it kind of, hopefully you're with me still. I do believe it makes sense. So when it comes to what are you, should you get to decide? Because it seems to me that the way that Elliot Page is using the word men is not the way that so many others are using the word men. I mean, when they say men, they typically refer to someone who, again, and you don't have to have all of these things. If you were a war veteran and your penis was blown off in an IED, people will still say, no, that's a guy, but typically has a penis, typically has larger stature, deeper voice, facial hair, armpit hair, all these kinds of things. So how much of those does I'm so confused with all of this. Does he have to represent in order to move to that category? Or does everyone else at just the statement that I am a he have to react to that? Because it seems to, the way that we use words is to communicate things to one another, and they have a fluid but rough meaning. And it does seem that if someone is, and I'm not saying this is the case with Elliot Page, is unwilling to adopt some of the things that we use that word for, that it is co-opting the use of that word in a way that makes it not useful for other people. Sure. So well, the switch to Elliot is one move to goes, okay, no, I am a man, right? This is a man name.
In the case of Elliot Page, though, I don't know if this is totally true because I don't know every single law, so there may be exceptions. But my impression is that what we have in society, according to people who think that there are implicit advantages to men, is that the advantages to men are undocumented, if that makes sense. They occur in the minds of the people in a thin slice split second, and that's advantageous. And that the advantages that occur to women are more documented in the sense that certain number of board seats must go to women, certain, Title IX, certain sports leagues have to be for women. So I think when Elliot Page identifies as a man, he doesn't accrue any more potential advantage, if that makes sense. So I think it's like, I don't think there'll be many bad faith actors identifying as men.
It's not advantage. What can be asserted is a disadvantage to other people. So if you are in a working place with Elliot Page and you say the word she, you can potentially be fired. Or like be brought at the very least in front of HR. So there are repercussions for other people depending on what someone says with regards to this particular thing. And so my fundamental question is words generally, but let's just take men, male, female, he, she. Who and where does the truth lie? Do you have to make moves to this the way that we use male, which is to say, tends to have, it's kind of like a symptom list. Like, do you have irritable bowel syndrome? Well, do you have hurting in your stomach? And we have 5 things. Then we go, that's irritable bowel syndrome. Like, men and women are almost like syndromes that we have, and that's how we use them. Or is the trump card, no, this is the way that I feel. It seems to me that if we allow for the way that I feel to be the singular trump card that dictates the use of a word, we will very quickly make language pretty useless in the sense that...
Well, why not just make it the same as any other self-identifying feature, which is to say, like, in the workplace, to the extent that someone says they're being misgendered, I want to be called he and you keep calling me she, and so I'm going to report you to HR. It's like, okay, well, I identify as Jewish. There's nothing in my DNA that says I'm Jewish. So what if
there is, but sure.
What if somebody says something that says I'm Christian? Okay, well, that seems like misgendering my religious identity.
Misreligioning.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, well, what if they say something mean about me being Jewish?
What if you interpret that you are Christian as mean? They don't need to say anything mean.
Yeah. I'm just saying
in this
that
analogy.
We have parallels for this, is what I'm saying. And so I think you can just base it off of what is the corporate's existing rule set for language.
Yeah, but it's not well. There's 2 questions, because we tend to say that there are more subjective states and that there are more objective. Now this breaks down, right? But if you insist that you want to run for president, you're, I think, 33, but you tell me, no, I'm actually 35 and eligible to run. We have a problem. Sure. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Can you run for president or can't you? And it's not like you get to pick that. Or do you? Can Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez run as 35? So all language doesn't fall under the same category. Now, if you tell me, I'm feeling happy today, and I go, but you're not smiling. You go, yeah, but I don't need to smile to feel happy. At some point, I kind of defer to you and go, you have more understanding of your internal subjective state than I do. But sometimes I'll be like, you're full of shit, man. I can tell.
Well, yeah, but I mean, also you could separate things. So even though chromosomes are a spectrum, they do delineate largely X, Y, X, X. So you actually could say, okay, well, let gender be self-identified, let sex be chromosomally identified, and then go in that direction, which is to say.
But that's not how words have worked. And I guess this is the question. Maybe we're using the words differently.
You could say age and sex defer to other people, defer to the microscope. And you could say that gender defers to self-identity. And
Why?
In that way.
Why? Because, and here's, and I just want to play devil's advocate in this. For thousands or, gender the use case of it has not been in how you're feeling about yourself. The use case has been, what can you do? What are you capable of? Can you make a baby with this particular person? Should you go to war?
Historically, did we separate sex and gender, though?
No.
So,
and that's how we've used the term.
Historically, sex has been used to determine a lot of things. And going forward, sex could be used to determine a lot of things. That's what I'm saying.
Well, pronouns, for instance. What determines pronouns? Sex or gender? Sex, and do you get to pick?
Well, that's the fight that's being waged, right?
Yes, exactly. And so I don't know the answer to these questions, but I like to ask them. And I would also be curious. I'm sure that there's somebody who's thought more about this, because I hear this question asked often, and I guarantee that I'm not the first. What is it specifically about gender that makes it a subjective internal experience from the perspective of the transgender community that does not apply to age, for instance?
Well, you could just bucket age and sex in the same category, and you could bucket gender.
You could, but I could,
religious identity in the same category.
Sure, but you could do a lot of things. I could bucket religious identity as an objective thing if I wanted, and I could bucket age as purely subjective.
Sure. I'm saying. I mean, honestly, I see complications in implementing transgender policy, but not here. Actually, this seems like it would be fairly easy, especially for like a private company, which is what you're describing.
So walk me through it.
Just treat self-identified gender the same way you would treat self-identified religion, which is to say, like, if I'm a Buddhist and you're a Christian and Justin's Jewish, I just like misassigned everyone, but whatever can be said to each other about our different religions is what you can say about genders, which is to say, if it's not a huge deal, if I say, oh yeah, Justin, how was your Christmas? He goes, oh, I'm actually Jewish. And then if I accidentally misgender him and he says, oh, I'm actually this gender.
Wait.
No, I'm saying treat them the same. I accidentally misreligion him. I accidentally misgender him. He corrects me. I go along with it. Same level of punishment, right? If I every day of December am asking Justin questions about Christmas that he finds offensive and I won't stop.
You're like, what's it like in your family?
I'm sure that there's a way for him to go to HR.
And be like, or
like,
somebody
dude,
keeps
this guy
calling you
is
the wrong name.
harassing
He
me
keeps calling me
about-
David. Yeah.
He's harassing me about being Christian, or he keeps calling me. He says that I'm Jewish, so my name must be.
I guess what we don't have
David.
are laws on the books to protect you from like if you call him David and his name is Justin, there is not, and
Well,
it
so I'm saying
depends.
companies and laws are different.
Sure.
And you're saying I'm saying a company has rules for this already.
Mm-hmm.
There's a thing that would happen if someone just kept calling me.
But here's my
kept
question.
saying like shalom to me or something.
Justin, how old are you?
25.
Okay, so Justin decides that he is now 45. He feels 45. He's an old soul. He likes Thelonious Monk. He's read all the classics.
Yeah.
And he gets along real well with our parents. You know what I mean? Okay. You speak to Justin and you're like, yeah, you weren't alive in the 80s. And he's like, yes, I was because I'm 45. How does that get navigated by HR? Do you have to cater to that at this point? Do you have to adjust that and go, that's right, you do remember 1982 because you are 45?
No, but I also don't think with the trans community, I would have to pretend the person had genitals that they didn't have.
No, but what you do, again, there's a lot of things that you have to adjust your understanding of the word men and women to move to theirs. That is what you have to do. Like if you've previously your whole life used the word man to mean one thing, you no longer get to do that and keep your job. You just can't. You have to adjust to theirs. And my question for everyone out there, and I mean this absolutely sincerely, is why not with age as well, for instance? I don't know. Do you have any?
I don't know. Is age dysphoria a thing, I assume? Because people are going to be like, you're making up a thing. But I assume there's people who do think that they're different ages.
Well, there's absolutely, there definitely could be. Yeah, I think there.
No, I think there are.
There's a lot of everything. How big, and by the way, how many do we need to have? Did transgenders have to hit a certain size of the population before we started taking it seriously? And is 0.6%
Oh yeah. Well, I'm trying to
that
strengthen
number?
your argument actually, because I could see people going,
100% sure.
You're making up straw man argument. So I'm just saying,
okay.
well, this is a real thing. That I'm sure there are people.
There's a lot of schizophrenics that think that people are listening to them, and they might, let's argue, they make up 0.6% of the population that are sure that people are tuning in. Do you have to, when in conversation with them, whisper and be like, I know the government is listening, so I just want to ask you, like, how do we negotiate this very different use of the words and their very different understanding of reality? At this point, what you're saying is it's in this particular negotiation, it is a deferral to the subjective decision of an individual in this particular case every time.
When did I say? I think what I've said is I don't know.
Okay, but we don't know then is the answer. Got it. Yeah.
No, I'm just saying that I think private companies have more rules than you're thinking for dealing with this already.
Sure. So let me, and another, I guess, it's fascinating. I don't know the answers to any of this. So this is the one where I got hung up.
Like, for instance, I'll tell you something. You're talking about, misgendering. You can't, if you walk into office every day and you talk to find a female employee and say, hey, sweetie, how's it going? Mm-hmm. She says, please don't call me sweetie. I don't like it. She doesn't identify as a sweetie, right? Or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And you say sweetie every day, you'll go to HR. So I don't think it's as complicated as you think for a private company to implement gender. Because it's just like, we have how have we treated religion? How have we treated
What if she doesn't
names?
like that I said, hey, she demands to be addressed as salutations?
I don't know, but I'm saying I bet that company has rules for this.
Who wins when I say hey and she demands I say salutations? And she goes to HR and say, everyone in this office needs to salute me. They need to say salutations, Mary.
What I'm saying is I bet every company has different rules for this.
They're different. We have different categories. In the case, this is what I'm trying to illustrate. In the case of hey versus salutations, we go with you. You win. You're allowed to say, hey, she's the crazy one. You don't have to salute her when you speak to her. What we are changing now is we are changing forever, it was you didn't get to tell me if you were a guy or a girl. That was the collective judgment
but
upon you.
All I'm saying is I think there are areas where this fundamentally creates conflict. Like when there's a board of directors and there's 3 of the 8 seats have to go to women. Defining what a woman is becomes very important. There's a draft because we're at war with Russia or at war with China. All of a sudden, defining who is a man, because only men can get drafted in the US, is extremely important. And I'm just saying in a private company, I don't think it's actually that hard because I imagine it follows the same rules as Sweetie.
This is what I'm saying. So I understand. Why does it follow the same rules as Sweetie and not the same rules as Salutations? So that's what I'm saying.
Well, why does Sweetie? I guess we'll start with why is Sweetie something that you can't say?
Because this is it. As a society, there's been a wave, and this might be the answer to this question, that Sweetie is therefore demeaning.
Okay.
And so we're kind of like navigating this point now
so I'm saying
with transgender.
All these corporate rules are just
reflections,
majority reactions to how many people tell them that a word is offensive. So Sweetie was fine in the 1920s.
Yes.
Hey, Sweetie, fine. At some point, it became, we have accepted that enough people say this is demeaning, that it's demeaning. Hey probably hasn't hit that
I would say.
amount of complaint.
Yeah.
And misgendering based on the news and the media, not just the 0.6% of people that are trans, but just the public backlash, I think has hit that amount of the populace that would say that you should treat this like Sweetie, which by the way was completely inoffensive in 1920.
Well, I think, and I totally agree with that. This is how we figure out language in a corporation. I think you're right. It's hit it in LA. You know what I mean? Like it hasn't hit it in Memphis necessarily or some other place. So,
and maybe there are different rules in different states.
Cultures.
Seriously, there really might be.
I mean, I'm not going to say it, but there are words in Britain that mean cigarette that in America mean you're fired. You know, like,
yes. And even beyond that, I would imagine that there are companies that you could call someone Sweetie, and if they complained, they would be told, "This isn't offensive. You kind of have to deal with it."
Yeah.
And then there's others where you'd be immediately told, "We'll take care of it. We'll call the person in the office, and they're going to get a big talking to."
Yep.
So yeah, maybe it does vary company to company.
Yeah. And then the one thing that I'll say with regards to this, the last Psychiatrist, really interesting writer on the internet, he probably in 2010 or 2011 wrote an article on transgender and asked the question, which I think is a great question, or the statement rather. He said, when you see a minority group effectively advocating for itself in media that group does not own, bet on the status quo of power asserting itself. So what that means is when you see transgenders who are 0.6% of the population ride a wave of popularity that is not reflected in 0.6% of the micropenis population, which is 0.6%, right? Mm-hmm. That they're not getting recognized and no more penis jokes. Like when you see that, you have to wonder, how do the objectives of this transgender group, which are probably very sincere, correspond with the cynical power grab of the media that promotes that? And I think the answer that he proposed in 2011, which I think is true, is that this was legacy media, newspapers, etc., asserting their right to tell you how to use language and what's real. It's that, look, hey, this has been, and maybe it's the case that it ought to change, but that they will tell you when it's time. For thousands of years, this has been a man, this has been a woman in your culture. Guess what? Today we say otherwise, and if you don't, you're a bigot. Now, that all might be appropriate, but the push of it from media is them asserting their power over communication and all that kind of stuff.
Well, two things. And by saying two things, I kind of let you attack whichever one is weakest, but I'm going to do it anyway. One, if you did make micropenis comments in a workplace, you would get in trouble. So in terms of like what should private, yeah, for sure. I could absolutely report you for...
What are you insecure about something?
Yeah, I can report you to HR for saying that.
Okay, maybe
100%, and they would pull you in and say you can't talk about this person's penis. You can't continue to make jokes at their expense. Now, not every company, just like we were saying about Sweetie, but for sure a lot of companies. So I think if you're gonna try to protect micropenis and trans, and they're both 0.6% of the population, you would see that that's occurring. So it's not that trans is disproportionately strong in
in the private companies.
And the second thing is, I don't see this as a successful way to do that. What you just said in terms of like, so there's the mainstream media, there's Forbes and there's New York Times. I don't think that people, it seems like an ineffective way for them to establish their power. I think a more effective way for them to establish their power would be to find a unique value prop that lets them be better than new media and beat the Young Turks and beat Ben Shapiro.
Of course.
And I think that if this has somehow gained them power, they have still lost tremendous ground. As fake news gets labeled every day, Ben Shapiro becomes more popular every day, Young Turks get more popular every day. Everyone on a podcast poo-poos Fox and CNN equally at this point. Or maybe let's say one will poo-poo Fox. And one will, like, they're getting shit on all the time. So if that was the case, that they were trying to survive and expand their power, this wasn't a great strategy, it seems, because they would have been better off just doing whatever Ben Shapiro did.
Yep. Well, I guess I'll go to the second point since you just said it. Yes, I think that this is not a conscious strategy. It is an unconscious reaction of an organization or an organism to these sorts of things. So, and it might not be the most effective thing.
Well, I just don't. I'm saying I'm not convinced that that's the motive.
Well, let me give you a reverse motive. Let's say that the transgender agenda was opposite what would keep newspapers in power. Do you think that they would be pushing it? Like, let's say that it somehow negatively impacted.
No, definitely not. But it could be neutral to it.
It at the very least has to be neutral. But if you're going to see a lot of it, are these businesses? Everything is a survival organization.
But they're going, I think it's much more likely if there's disproportionate coverage that it's because it's getting clicks. I don't think it's because they're trying to.
Exactly. Oh, sure.
But no, I'm saying I don't think it's media's attempt to tell you that they're the ones that can define something. I don't think
you're
it's
saying
that
that
sophisticated.
It's profit motive isn't.
I think it's the same reason that Trump got a bunch of free coverage in 2016. Like Trump, don't like Trump, really didn't matter. He was going to get the coverage because it got money. I think as trans became something that people.
I think as trans became how did trans become?
No one was clicking those articles, they wouldn't have gotten written.
No one was clicking them in 2010. So this was they made fetch happen. 0.6%, like people that are genuinely interested, 0.6% in their family and their loved ones.
They must have tried. I mean, surely they tried to make other things happen that didn't happen. There was something in the people that got this to be at the forefront of so many.
Yes,
minds.
They can't make anything. I agree.
I think they're just profit motivated. I don't think this was an attempt to go, gender is a thing that has been the same for 10,000 years. And we as New York Times are going to stake our claim to remain powerful by telling you what it is. I think they just went, do a bunch of shit and see what makes us money.
So again, I don't know, but I think that both could be drivers of it. So the profit motive being the one that kills, it's like, look, this is losing us money. It's dead. It's gone. But also, I genuinely suspect that these were not wildly successful topics without a massive amount of coverage and push and making it front and center.
I actually think that the best thing that happened for the transgender movement was being part of LGBT. I think that they basically let the LGB part like kind of be the spearhead.
Yeah.
10% of the population, harder to ignore. You know what I mean?
Yep.
But they bond over the fact that at a period of time, they're the minority and they're the weird outcast group about sex and gender. You know, so they kind of do lump together naturally, especially if you go back 1920s, 1950s. But then because it is LGBT, that a natural second domino of gay rights being pushed forward and gay marriage being legalized and all that stuff. And then all of a sudden, I think there's like a very small percentage of people under 18 are even against gay marriage. Like the gay rights movement has had huge victories in the past 20 years, let's say. Well, the T is part of LGBT. So I think that would be a natural second domino, is that as you see LGBT rights strengthening, then transgender rights will strengthen. You know what I mean? Because they're a coalition.
Yes. And I think the same analysis can be applied to LGB. You know, like, again, it's not 0.6, but it's 10-ish or less. What tipped it? What made it effective? And profit motive might account for why that. I don't know the initial driver, but it's.
Well, when you're 10% of the population, sorry to cut you off. I was just thinking it's a lot of people have direct experience at that point.
Yes.
So like with trans people, you might not know anyone, right? But like we had a friend who came out of the closet.
Mm-hmm.
We all liked him before. We all liked him afterwards. Now, maybe in the 20s, he would have come out and get beaten up. But I think the reason that LGB made such progress is because it's at some level, when you're 10% of the population, like everybody knows somebody who is gay or lesbian, or knows somebody who knows somebody.
But that's been true for as long as people have been around. I don't think that the numbers have changed. I think that the perhaps culture, technology, all these kind of things account for it, but I don't think that knowing people is enough to say why our attitudes have shifted.
Well, when you have the internet, it's harder to like put it to the side or hide that person, I think, which was the strategy for a long time. You know what I mean? When Ellen is coming out as gay and is a national icon.
But we had icons in the 50s. You know, we had icons in the 60s.
Did we have
70s.
gay icons in the 20s?
We didn't have gay icons. We had, I mean, I guess there were probably a lot of gay playwrights, and I don't know if he was Oscar Wilde, but there was a lot of people out there. So I don't know that the internet accounts for it, but I do understand your point from prior to that it might not be just asserting that we have the right to claim, that power motive or profit motive can account for a lot of why these things catch hold. But still, a fantastic question, whatever the answer is, to ask oneself is, when you see a small minority group blowing up in media, this doesn't mean that you can't support that sincerely, but ask yourself, why is this corporation on board? And the answer could just be for money, but it also might be beyond that sometimes. And it just leads to interesting realizations about how the world works and where benevolence really is and where opportunism is occurring. Make sense?
I understand what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. But
so far, I haven't really seen anything, and maybe it's like coming, but I haven't seen anything in the transgender movement that really like negatively impacts people who aren't transgender.
So what you would, I mean, you have to be careful with that. Now, so far, it might not happen, but on this podcast, you said she when you should have said he.
Mm-hmm.
That has gotten people in deep shit in the past. So I hope that the case is that it doesn't negatively impact, but that might impact you negatively is something to consider.
Well, I think there's two ways that happens, and maybe we just live in a world where people don't recognize this, but there's like slip ups and there's purposeful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not recognizing what
you run for president. No one will give a shit that you slipped up.
You think?
Yeah. Yes. You think they would take something out of context and run it a million times? You ever see Donald Trump talking about MS-13? You ever see Donald Trump talking about those are fine people?
So they might talk about it.
What about fine people? The fine people thing went on. Watch the fine people clip. 30 seconds later, he explicitly says he's not talking about white supremacists. It is a stark. This is not included in that category. There's no room to misinterpret. That was the backbone of the election. Absolutely, someone will clip up our podcast in the least flattering way, where any slip up will be. I mean, it'll go beyond that. You'll find something you're like, we'll be cutting pieces together and all kinds of shit. But yeah, no, I think it impacts people. I think if you were in a public position of trying to get votes or anything, that literal things that you have said today with regards to transgender people that were good faith explorations of the topic could get you canned.
Well, probably you, but not me, based on how the conversation's gone.
What about, no, you think so? I'm generally asking questions. I think I slipped up less than you did.
I don't know.
This is the thing. You don't even know what you've done wrong. And I think that it is naive to assume that it wouldn't be you or anyone else trying to explore this topic. That you're just supposed to instantly understand, get it, without exploring it, questioning it, making mistakes as you do, and pushing back at various points and being like, wait a second, where does the truth in all of this lie? I'm being completely sincere in my exploration of this. And if somebody doesn't think so, that you can let me know, but that is my honest to God internal experience of it. And maybe you think that you can see objectively past that.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I'm honestly, more than anything, I'm surprised it's such a, well, I don't even know if it is a big topic, honestly. I never hear anyone talking about it, not on podcasts or the news.
Yeah.
So
it's funny.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I'm trying to scale back listening to the news and listening to certain podcasts and trying to reorient on what's real. I think that the Trump polls being so off was a good reminder that most of this is garbage. And same with the Mayor Garcetti's thing being vigorously enforced and creating panic. And then you read the 12-page press release and it doesn't really change your life.
Yeah.
I'm trying to pull back and just be like, a lot of this stuff is literally just meant to incite
Seems wise.
emotion.
Yeah, seems intelligent. Probably get more done. Feel better.
I've never had any run-ins with a transgender person that got aggro.
No.
It's not something that I see outside of comments or Twitter.
Sure.
So
yeah, that's true. And I think as long as you are not running to host the Oscars or for public office and you want to have a mid to small sized business on the internet, you're likely to be okay.
Even Kevin, speaking of hosting the Oscars, even Kevin Hart is okay. He's still selling out stadiums.
Sure. You just can't host the Oscars if you don't. And again, this is not, I don't mean to draw perfect equivalence, but people will dig through things that you have said and find them lacking, and it will affect your ability to stand in prominent public spaces. That is a given at this point, I think. But if you don't want to stand in any prominent public spaces,
well, I guess, yeah, and it depends. Yeah, like he couldn't host the Oscars, but I don't think he's monetarily been affected at all by that tweet being dug up.
No, I don't, because his audience didn't care. Now, maybe somebody didn't take it for a movie. There was one gatekeeper, but his audience, he actually had a special. It was one of his better ones of his last 2 or 3 that I watched recently. He did it in his house.
In his house,
It's on Netflix. Did you
he's
watch
still
it?
on the Jumanjis. Like, he's still getting cast in movies.
Yeah. But anyway, so real life stuff. Our assistant got rear-ended. This is a little while ago. And she got out of the car, and she was pulling into a parking spot. The woman hit her at 30 miles an hour, smashed her into the front car. They get out. The woman's crying, apologizing. I'm so sorry. I gave this. It's okay. She takes a photo. You know, she's at home, and she's like, all right, at least I'm at my house. I was parking. You know, this car is totaled.
Yeah.
Comes in, day later, says, this woman is saying that I reversed into her.
Really?
Yeah. Dude. Freaking crazy.
Wow.
So this is just
she said at the time that the woman was like super
completely
apologetic. It was all my fault.
And now I don't know how it's going to shake out, because if you look at the way the cars are, it's like, so I reversed into you and then catapulted into 3 other cars forward ahead of the spot. And luckily she has some photos that she took of the incident, but I don't think they immediately called the police to get a police report. I think they had a handful of people. I don't know if she got all the witnesses things, but this is just a PSA for everybody that is ever involved in business or illegal stuff. If you don't know the person or trust the person, words are wind. You need pictures and affidavits and police and words. Contracts are what matters. What people say to you is it's incredible that, and it's not incredible. I'm not surprised. That woman found out it was going to cost her a lot of money and went, you know, it would be easier than paying, just lying.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, I have a dash cam for that reason.
Yeah. No, I've been in similar situations where it's like somebody's really upset. It's like, you know what? It's okay. It's okay. And like, please don't call the police because my insurance. And you want to, you're like, I guess I'm fine. They said they're going to cover it. We can be cool. And then that person is not cool.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting. So yeah, what do you do? Because you want to live a trusting life. You know what I mean? You want to believe people, but at the same time, you want to cover your ass. So do you just say like, hey, listen, we don't have to call the cops. I just need you to like talk into my camera right now.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, just go ahead. Just go ahead and say what happened into my camera, and we'll make sure that we both agree with that. And I'll be like, yeah, that's what happened. I think that's a good start or something right there. Yeah, you're generally pretty good at that. At friendly, being like, yeah, could you write that down, please?
Yeah.
I've just been burned in the past is a good way to get past that stuff. Hey, you know, I know someone, or I've been burned in the past, so I know this might seem overboard, but could you please write it out, film it, etc.
Well, I just have a natural paranoia, man. We got a new personal assistant, and I got her social security number, her social security card, and a photo of her ID before I let her walk my dog.
No kidding.
I was like, I can't just give a stranger my dog. So I have like a weird worst case scenario thing of like, okay, well, now I can identify you and call the police on you if you just show up and steal my dog.
To be fair, I think you're crazy, but when we lived in Brazil, the woman who cleaned our house at first, what started was like, dude, these charges showed up on my credit card for like a $1,200 Samsung bill. Like, what's up with that? Oh, that's weird. Like, sorry, dude. And then like 3 days later, like, dude, me too. Like, my credit card's going crazy. And we thought that somebody at the restaurant was like running the cards. And then she stopped showing up and everybody got hit with like $22,000 per card worth of
She was buying Samsung TVs, right?
She was buying TVs.
Yeah.
And I'm sure flipping them. So
everybody but me.
Yeah, everybody but you,
That's
man.
true.
You're
But that's
the-
just because I hide my credit card.
Exactly.
It's not because she wasn't. It's not like she liked me.
Oh no,
I
had like 2 or 3 cards at that point because I was playing the points game,
Yeah.
and they just got banged, man. Luckily, they reimbursed me because I could not have afforded that at that point in time in my life.
Shout out to my mom for making me paranoid.
Yeah, thanks.
It only comes at living with minor anxiety at all times.
At all
It's
times.
the only cost.
But I didn't have to contact Citibank once and say, hey,
The
that was
small price of low level anxiety at all times.
It is crazy. We don't need to go deep in this because I have nothing to say other than the lack of security on credit cards is incredible. That Citibank will just eat that charge. If anyone gets their hand on this piece of plastic, nobody checks name, nobody checks ID. You could in the internet, there's none of that. That you could just run up thousands of dollars with access to nothing. Essentially, is it's wild. it's a crazy business model. I guess it works for them though.
I mean, as long as they're willing to refund it whenever it's illegal, it seems like from the
Doesn't
consumer's
bother me.
perspective,
Yeah.
it's great.
Doesn't bother me.
What's weird is that means they make so much on fees that they can cover that.
Yep.
So
Think up a theft.
this is an interesting thing. I noticed an ex of mine did not understand how credit card interest worked. And so she had credit card debt on her credit cards and she had cash in her bank account and she wouldn't pay off her credit cards because she liked having $5,000 of cash in the bank for emergencies.
Yeah.
Which I said, you have $5,000 of credit card debt. Why don't you just pay the debt, have like no money in your savings account? But if you need, in case of emergency, you can just use the credit card. Because right now you're getting charged 10% a year. Like your credit card percentage for
She's
interest
holding
is
out for credit card debt
insane.
cancellation, dude.
I was just fascinating me. I realized that we do not educate people on certain things in public school that will become very important to them, like personal finance.
Yeah.
And so this girl who was not dumb, but just had no idea how credit cards worked, was like, yeah, it makes more sense to just keep a balance on my credit card and keep cash because I need cash.
Yeah.
And then let the credit card company charge her so much money that you can call and say, hey, this person, I didn't buy this TV. And they just go, no problem. Here's $2,000 back. Because we're making this on suckers who don't pay their credit cards.
Yeah, man. Personal finance is the dumbest branding of what that is. Because I remember there were a handful of opportunities where there was like a college thing or whatever, or maybe even high school, there was something. But personal finance is the lamest sounding thing you could possibly do. It's like, I'm going to balance my checkbook, is what that reminds me of. And so I never took it. But if you named it something else like wealth creation, I might have signed up.
Being as rich as possible class.
Yeah. I think you could have gotten a lot more people.
Sure.
That's just terrible marketing. Then I have a couple random things. We don't need to do them all because it's been a minute. But one last thing, just in the category of fame sucks, is there's a Twitch streamer called Sweet Anita.
Okay.
And she just made this video of how she's been stalked. And there's somebody who has found her house immediately. Like, this person is internet savvy. Told her that he's going to kill her a bunch of times. He was intercepted by the cops once, a minute from her house, with a knife. And she lives in England, which is like, that's the weapon in England. And the cops clearly can't do anything because he's just a guy walking with a knife, which is like,
it's insane how little police can do about stalkers.
Yeah.
I've dated women.
This is what she said.
I've dated women who had stalkers, and they're like, this guy's outside my house every day, staring in my window from the sidewalk, freaking me out. He's like,
and you're like, I'm not going
dropped
anywhere.
off gifts at my house, like threatened me. And the cops just go, well, I mean, none of this is illegal. So you call us if he does something illegal.
He said something and he gave you a gift.
I'm trying to prevent the murder or the rape.
Yeah.
One person I know, this person they used to work with had a schizophrenic break, thought that he was Jesus Christ reborn and that she was his Virgin Mary and his Mary Magdalene at the same time.
So his mom and prostitute friend?
15 calls a day, strings of text messages. I'm going to find you. We're going to get married, this and that, like calling saying, I'm going to kill you. But the police said they couldn't do anything. They're like, you can get a restraining order, but until he violates it, you can't do anything, despite the fact this guy is telling you he's going to show up at your house and kill you.
Mm-hmm. That was what her video was about, which is obviously she's incredibly sad and angry and frustrated by that, which is
She said too the same, that he threatened to kill her and the cops won't do anything about it.
Yeah, and the solution that people offer her, which I admit is where my brain went, and this isn't like it's a your fault thing, but it's like, can you move? Can you do like what can you control? But even then, she's like, one, I don't want to move, but two, this is the type of individual that it would not take more than 3 days to figure out where I've gone.
Yeah,
You know, like this person is committed and tech savvy enough to immediately find me.
No, it seems like all you can do is go on the record and say, hey, when I show up murdered or missing, here's your prime suspect.
Yeah.
But like they won't do anything to prevent the murder or the
And what and they say, get a dog, get a weapon, get training. It's just like, ugh, do I have to?
I'm an idiot. I thought stalking was a crime. I thought there was a point where like you could just get punished for calling someone 15 times a day.
Well, you can get restraining orders, but those take time and they're basically not very enforceable because by the time it's like, well, where was he? I understand why we have laws that allow for people to move freely about an area, you know, but also how do you deal with people that clearly are so mentally disturbed that the laws that reasonably make sense for every other person do not make sense for them all of a sudden.
You'd even think like there should be a way where if someone calls me 15 times a day to tell me that they're the rebirth of Jesus Christ and that I have to marry them for the sake of the universe or whatever, and I just have 45 voicemails in a week that I can be like, hey, can I sue this person in civil court if they call me again? Can we create some sort of incentive for them to leave me alone? Even if it's not jail time, can I just get $100 every time this person calls me?
Yeah.
Like you'd think there'd be some way to create a system that disincentivized this kind of like stalking behavior, but...
Well, I think fortunately it is a rare phenomena, but if you're in the community of attractive female public figure, it's not that rare.
I think even just attractive female.
Yeah,
I know two non-famous women who had stalkers.
Well, yes, in that group it's probably less common, but sure, I get the point. Is that there's a portion of us attractive women who are gonna have to deal with this a lot more than I will. Nobody's ever going to be waiting outside for me.
Don't let the universe hear that.
I mean, no, don't you say what you want to be true? No one's ever going to be waiting outside for me, right? The universe.
But then how do jinxes work?
Yeah.
There's manifestation and there's jinxes. I'm unclear on how... Justin, do you know how jinxes and manifestations work
Law of attraction.
together?
No, I'm not.
No?
All right, let me see if I have anything else before we go to questions. I had just a bunch of one-liners that I'll bring them up if you want. We can throw it away. Riley Reid was on Eric Weinstein. Yes, Stein.
What a pair.
Yes, but she was on by her full name, which is why I was confused at first. She's got she's a porn actress, and she was on. They were talking about the wealth gap in porn, which I just thought was interesting.
Eric Weinstein.
Yeah.
And Riley Reid.
Yes.
How did they get in contact?
Talking about well, she's been on the podcast circuit. She's doing that.
Did she write
stuff.
a book?
I don't know. But I just watched one 5-minute clip. But the wealth gap in porn, as you might expect, is that women start at, she was saying, at $2,000, $2,500 a shoot up to $10K, and men start at $300 a shoot up to $2,000. So like your highest paid guy is not even scratching the beginning of where women are. And is that right? Is that fair? I have my take, but I'm curious for yours.
Well, yeah, this is weird because I tend to just say that the market should be able to do things like that. Mm-hmm. But I also tend to say that my impression of the wage gap is that if you take people agnostic of talent, experience level, or position, you end up with a vastly overstated wealth gap, if that makes sense.
Well, they're also doing different work, to be clear. You know
no, so, like people talk about the bottle girls and the busboys in Vegas. Bottle girls make 5 times more.
Well, we talk about this, to be clear. We're the only ones who talk because we lived in Vegas.
Sure, but I'm saying like you can make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year as a bottle girl in Las Vegas if you're an attractive woman, like $400,000 a year, and a guy can make like $100,000 a year.
Yeah,
but the people paying for bottles want attractive women there more than they want
the
attractive men there, so that seems fine to me.
Yes.
So like, I'm fine with a wealth gap in the bottle industry and the porn industry.
Yeah.
But I also don't think that gender is the most important thing to divide income from. I think it's like experience, value created, what you're doing.
Yeah. Forget gender. There's also a supply and a demand thing. All right. Our market wants someone who looks like her and someone who looks like you. There
I
are
think for instance, I bet gay porn actors make more than straight porn actors.
why?
Why do I think that?
Yeah,
Because I've heard it.
really?
Yeah.
That's shocking to me. That
Straight men will do gay porn because there's more money in it.
oh, I wonder if that's do they have to? Well, maybe I don't know. I just had a bunch of thoughts. In my head.
You didn't say anything.
Are they? So is the straight man known as
No.
the straight man? No. Interesting. Okay, so maybe that's just
You
something
just
that
make
I would
more
have
money
intuited wrong.
in gay porn than you do in straight porn.
Got it. Well, that would make sense why they would do that in that case. But yeah, I generally, it's different. It's different work. The market has different things. There's different supply and demand. For you guys are clearly participating in different roles. I don't see why. I don't understand why in God's name you'd be paid anywhere near the same. It doesn't seem to make any sense to me. I think there ought to be just the general idea of viewing things primarily through gender doesn't make sense. Like, she is providing more value to this shoot. She's going to sell more copies. If you remove her and you replace her with someone else, it's harder to do to get that role. But she was of the mindset that equality. And so I guess, yeah, I don't agree with that. Was my take.
Neither do I. I think equity of outcome. I've never heard a good argument for why.
Yeah,
that would be the case.
Yes. Yeah, I think male NBA players should be paid more than their female counterparts, given that they earn more money and draw more crowds. I think the same thing. I actually think the same thing is true. This is one that people get.
Well, that's a great point, actually. I think I view female porn stars making more as male porn stars the same way I view LeBron James making more than the best WNBA player.
Yeah.
Which is like completely fair because it should be based on amount of money generated for the company that you work for.
Well, it's not the case. So in tennis, prize money has been Serena Williams fought to make it even though she doesn't bring in the numbers or play for as long as her male counterparts, but demanded equal pay, which for equal work. But it's not equal work because she doesn't have to play as many games as they do. Nor does she have to compete against the best athletes in the world.
I don't think solving for identical outcomes is good.
And I do actually, no, I want to take it back. I don't know if it was Serena Williams explicitly, but I do know that was a big.
Did it happen?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, that they successfully lobbied for, which is
that
seems ludicrous to me.
Seems like a not good outcome. Like in the same, if female soccer players make more than male soccer players, or make less than male soccer players, or make the same as male soccer players, I think it should be based on the amount of money that they generate from fans that are willing to pay to see them.
Yeah.
And for tennis players,
well, this is the other thing. So I'll throw in a wrinkle there, and my data is coming from Andrew Schultz. Okay, so take this with a grain of salt. But apparently, the female soccer team years ago had the option to be paid as a percentage of like viewership and this, or to get a flat salary. And they chose to write a contract for flat salary. Then they won everything and did the backwards math and calculated that they would have earned more. So they sued them, which is like,
and they lost because they signed a contract.
And they lost because they signed a contract. But that's just the one wrinkle there is they would have been paid more than the men, except they opted for financial security.
Sure. I'm just saying in any viewership based model, getting paid based on the amount of views you generate makes total sense to me. This is like me suing iTunes because Joe Rogan gets more views than me and saying it's age discrimination. It's like, no, man, people just would rather listen to him at the moment.
Well, the clearest example is perhaps sales, which is imagine that you had a sales floor and there's 50-50 men and women, and imagine that on the sales floor, the men outsold the women and that they made a higher commission rate, and then the women then sued. Or you can imagine this in reverse, women, men, doesn't matter. Sued to say that there's gender discrimination because I can draw a line and on average women don't make as much, without respect to what you're creating or providing, because that's what entertainment is. It's a sales position. How many people can I sell eyeballs wise and sponsorship wise and time wise? But yeah, so I disagreed.
Yeah, I disagreed.
I
also disagree.
Cool. That was easy.
There's also, but yeah, it's funny. People like, there are sales positions where men tend to outperform in that industry, but there's also like pharmaceutical sales,
medical supplies,
medical
baby.
device sales.
Yep.
There's industries that
women
can make
crush
hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and the women tend to outperform the men.
Yes.
And it's like, this makes sense. If doctors would rather buy from someone, then we should pay the person that gets the most sales for the company.
Yeah. Now, this obviously gets down a sticky slope, and we don't have to go to it. We've gone too long. But like, what if you find that doctors buy more from a particular race? You know, what if you find that doctors buy more from a particular this? I don't have the answers to these questions, but they are fun little rabbit holes to go down. Because if you find, for instance,
it might depend on the doctor, though. Certain doctors might buy more from black people. Certain doctors might buy more from white people.
Yes, but let's say that on the whole, society is discriminatory, such that doctors predominantly unevenly want to buy from, and just to mix things
women.
up. Yeah.
That is what I mean. This is the case, and we allow it.
Yes. We are advocating to allow that. Riley Reid is saying, no, you have to pay everyone even regardless of what the market wants. Doesn't matter what the market wants. If it's comparable work, meaning you're showing up for roughly the same amount of hours, forget your output, because who cares? We're going to pay you the same. I've agreed with you thus far, is that we have to allow the market to decide the value of the salesperson that is there.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this. We don't have to beat it to death, but or if you're going to divide by race and you're going to divide by gender, should we divide by IQ? Should we divide by height? Should we divide by other things?
You mean equalize? You mean equalize by these sorts of things?
Yeah, I'm saying if you're going to look at salespeople and you're going to say, well, on average, let's say black salespeople make 10% more than white salespeople. We don't like that, so we're going to take that 10%, divide it equally amongst white and black people. We're gonna take some of the money from black salespeople and give it to white salespeople. It's like, what if I find that people with 120 IQ sell more than people with 90 IQ?
Yeah, you can't control it.
Are you going to take that excess money and equalize it? Like, it just seems like
same thing occurs, and we mentioned this with heterosexual versus homosexual. Homosexual men, on average, earn 10% more than straight men do. Now, why? Could be correlated IQ. I hear that on average that they tend to be smarter. It could be any number of things. Do we equalize there? Do you know what I mean?
Like, no, this is really my high level thing. It's like, okay, if we're going to equalize, why have we picked this? Because I can think of other ways to equalize.
And you'll get interesting answers when you find that. And what you tend to see is that it is, and we've talked about this, it's a power move. It's somebody asserting for more for themselves, but not.
Riley Reid is asserting more for
that's
not
a good,
herself.
yeah.
Riley Reid is saying
that's a great point.
That she said she should make less. Well, or she's saying men should make more and the owner should make less.
I don't think she'd be as into it if it came out of her pocket. If you went, okay, we have $10,000 for talent. Normally you're going to get 8, or you're going to get 8.5, and he was going to get 1. But don't worry, you're each going to get 5.
Yeah.
See how willing she is.
I'd be curious.
Maybe with her current income, I don't think when she was starting out. That's not any diss on her. That's, I think, a completely reasonable stance to take. Just to say, I am more valuable. Why am I subsidizing this person that is 10 times more replaceable than I am? I would back that decision completely. I live that decision in my business. But yeah. So anyway, questions, unless you have other stuff.
No, we got a couple things. One, we have another kind of a sponsor, but a Patreon, or a patron, who we turned into a sponsor because this person donated $300 to our Patreon, and they own a business. It's our friend.
Yes, this one is super exciting. It's our good buddy Justin, who came in on Patreon, but he actually has a business called Kettle and Fire. They make bone broth. So you've been a huge drinker of bone broth, but what I know about it, and I actually just ordered some, is bone broth is super high density protein, really tasty. It's got a lot of micronutrients. So a lot of what is missed out when you get meat are those things that you see at the bottom of the nutrition facts that are incredibly helpful for muscle development and growth and all those sorts of things. So bone broth is very high density of that, super high density protein. And the thing that I like about it, as someone who's talked a lot about ethical meat, is that you are not contributing to the demand to kill a single animal. Most of the times when animals are killed, their meat is harvested and the bones are just given away. They're just thrown out. So I've talked to Justin, who runs the company. He has assured me that every single can or every single box of bone broth has contributed 0 to the sum total of chickens or cows that are being killed for it. And he will not do that. That is something that I think is very important to me, at least, for as long as we advocate this. So check it out, kettleandfire.com/Charlie and Ben, or if you go to Kettle and Fire, it's discount code C&B. And you've tasted it, so you can tell me something about how you drink it, what it does for you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I've been buying Kettle and Fire out of pocket for years, and I think it's great. To your point, especially given that I've stopped eating what I consider unethical forms of protein, but I try to get a lot of protein in my diet. It's very nice to just be able to pour it into a cup, throw it in the microwave, throw some turmeric, black pepper in there. I literally had it for breakfast today before the podcast. So it's been part of my diet for years.
Yeah. And by the way, turmeric and black pepper is anti-cancer. Yeah. Ben's crazy with the supplements and the anti-cancer. So this is part of his stack. I'm going to incorporate it. We appreciate you, Kettle and Fire. So please give him a check out. I'm going to also do the same thing, and I'm using the code. So it's kettleandfire.com/Charlie and Ben.
I've been paying full price for
like
years.
An idiot.
I don't even get a friends and family discount.
But I'm stoked. I actually, I was telling, so I regularly just wake up, get on the computer, do this kind of stuff, and eat my first meal at like 5 p.m. and that's it. And I watched a video of myself from 2017, and I had fucking muscle, and I didn't look so gaunt. And I'm like, shit, I need to eat more. So this is going to be part of my increased protein, because it's tough when you don't eat chicken and beef to get enough protein. So I'm excited for it, and very excited to have him as a sponsor.
I recommend the chicken flavor, and then also the chicken and mushroom flavor.
Yep. Check them out. Let's do it.
Cool. First question is, how do you guys draw the line between platonic and intimate interactions? Sometimes when I have a vulnerable conversation with a close guy friend or otherwise give attention to a friend, I get a feeling that I'm being too intimate for friends, despite neither of us being attracted to each other.
I'm always intimate. 100% intimacy all the time.
So wait, close guy friends that you're being too intimate with them when you talk about feelings? Is that what I'm hearing?
Mm-hmm.
I guess and what was the question? How do I draw the line?
So that's not where I draw my platonic line, just to be,
Yeah.
my thinking is platonic versus sexual.
Yes.
So when I talk in a video
I
talk about touch, I will talk about the importance of platonic universal touch. That isn't not intimate. It's not that a handshake is good and a hug is bad. I will hug my guy friends. I'm just saying don't do something sexual.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, to the extent that you feel comfortable having a conversation with a close friend about something that you consider intimate.
Yeah.
Sounds great.
I would jack up the intimacy. I mean, as long as we're using it the same way, like you're intimate with your friends, with your mother, with your father, like you have close shared connection with them. That does not imply any sort of sexual interest. And I don't think your friends or family are necessarily confused by that. If you think that opening up to someone is an indicator of sexual interest, then I would encourage you to check that, investigate that, because that has not been true by any means in my experience or life.
Yeah, I could imagine where initial intimacy without calibrating for someone you don't know well could maybe be weird, just in the sense that it's not always the most fun thing to talk about. Let's say like your past child abuse to a stranger. But
have you listened ever to Dax Shepard's podcast? He's funny. He talks about, he's like, yeah, I go to parties and immediately just started talking about how I was molested because that's the stuff that I'm interested in.
Well, no, to be clear, I think it can go well. I'm just saying, where could this go poorly? Imagine someone who's not as charming as Dax.
Yes.
And so I'm saying, like, this person has a concern.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you can't, dude. I think you can start talking. I did this in Craig Ferguson. People were like, you can't just start talking about your sexual kinks. It's like, you can, but I'm not going to try to convince you in a YouTube comment that you can.
Because you can't. The fact that
Craig can. A lot of people can. So I'm not saying you can't start with intimate topics, but I'm thinking, how could this go wrong? Where does this question come from?
Yeah.
Maybe this person is scared that they're going to push people away by being intimate. But I think if it's a person that you have spoken to before and consider a friend, I struggle to imagine where it would be a bad thing to be intimate with a friend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Let's keep doing it.
Next is, hi, Ben and Charlie. I've been watching your videos and practicing being more charismatic for a while now, and I'm really happy with how far I've come so far.
Nice.
I'm social and outgoing when I'm prepared for it and have time to get into the proper mindset. However, there are times when I'm focused on myself and don't even consider talking to other people, like when I'm at the gym. A few times people have tried talking to me there, but I'm not as interesting or as witty as I'd like to be. Do you have any tips for quickly getting into a more sociable mood?
Yes. So the first thing that I would say doesn't answer your question, but it's totally cool to have times in your life, and you can decide whether this is one of them at the gym, where you're just like, I'm not on at the gym. Like, I'm at the gym to exercise, and if you happen to speak to me, it's just not the best time to do that and to get the best version of me. And I'm willing to miss out on connections or friendships that might have been formed there because I'm doing just fine in that arena. And the gym is where I work out. That's totally cool. Presuming that you come down on the other side, and you're like, no, I've decided that I want to be more open at the gym. I would say it's all about, what is it called? Is it framing? What's the thing you do? Preempting?
Priming?
Priming. Yes, it's how you prime yourself. So headphones are the destroyer of being charismatic. You put your headphone in, imagine what that does. It locks you within your own skin suit. Like, you're not talking to other people, you're not hearing them. That will destroy your priming. So what you can do is have one headphone in and listen to like loud, fun, excited music and bop around and be fun. But you need to connect somehow with the world. So don't have both headphones in. And then the other thing is be friendly with the person at the desk.
Yeah, this is what I was going to
Like-
say. People, turn it on when you need it. It is definitely possible, but you can just give yourself an advantage by turning it on the second you walk into the gym. Especially if it's like, oh, there's this pretty girl at the gym I want to talk to, or oh, there's this guy that seems cool I want to be friends with. I would never make them the first person I spoke to in the hour. You know, I wouldn't go 60 minutes without talking and then approach someone who I've decided I really want to be friends with, or I've decided I'm really attracted to. I would start with whoever's around me, like working out on the bench. Hey, are you using this? Okay, yes, no, blah, blah, blah. Make a joke like, are you using this? No, thank God it's way too heavy for me, or like something. And now I'm smiling, I'm laughing. Everyone in the gym is looking at me, having conversations, making other people laugh. Then when I go talk to them, it's just the natural occurrence of the gregarious person talking to the next person that they see. Versus if they see me with headphones, frowning, walking around for an hour, not talking to anyone, and then I beeline it for them, take my headphones out and try to talk to them. It's just a very different vibe.
And the thing that is true in every scenario that Ben gave some
Still would
examples
work,
of,
by the way, but
yeah, you could do it.
harder.
It's way harder. Is the random questions. When I moved to Costa Rica, I was like, where's this building? Where is a good restaurant? So it's not forcing it too much, but my guess is that if you're in quiet mode at the gym, when you see a bench, rather than ask the nearest person if they're using it or if they're seeing someone use it, you like scope it out. You try to get that info with your eyes and not by communicating with another human. So every time you have a question or a thought or a thing, say it out loud. Is this guy moving this? Hey, do you know a random? I'm trying to find a fourth exercise for shoulders. This is totally random. Do you know anything good? And find the guy that looks like he does. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
You don't need to ask. But when you have a thought or a question, to verbalize it, and instead, like what a lot of people do is like, what is a good exercise for shoulders? They try to answer the question silently. Don't do that. And that'll get you in the mode of being outgoing.
Yeah.
Cool.
I would also say in the gym, there are people who talk too loudly at the gym, but most everyone that I see who's trying to communicate at the gym is too quiet to be charismatic, if that makes sense. They're like whispering to the person, hey, are you using this bench? And I think just coming in with a big smile and say, hey, what's up? Sorry, are you using this? No? Okay, cool. Awesome. Thanks, man. Like, just get used to being okay, being overheard.
And it's like a few more words than usual. Instead of like, thanks, you might be like, oh, appreciate it, dude. Like, I'll be back in just 1 minute. I'm just working out like a few more words that gets you going. So
I think your argument that people have no choice in their trajectory and that it's only a product of their parents and their genetics is wrong. There are tons of people who started with bad circumstances and rose to the upper levels of success, and there are also tons of people who started off with every advantage and are not successful. How do you account for this?
That's not an argument against determinism. The argument would be that their parents, despite being upper class, and their genetics, despite being good, led them to there.
Yes.
You know, now I would like to not believe in determinism. I just haven't found a compelling argument against it. So I'm open-minded here. But the argument would be, it's not that being born poor keeps you poor, although it tends to. It's not that being born rich makes you happy. It's just that wherever someone ended up, it was like they were a pool ball on a pool table, except instead of having 15 pool balls or however many there are, there's a trillion atoms.
Yeah.
And so their downfall from trust fund baby to drug addict was
preordained in a sense.
Unavoidable, given everything that has happened for millions of years leading up to it. That's the argument for determinism. It's not that you can't shift social status.
Yeah. Yes. So I hope that made sense, and I'll try to even slow down what you said. So one example is the atomic level. So if you bump an atom into another atom, scientists can measure where it will go. Like if you bump a cue ball into another thing. And if you do a break, that's more complicated, but it essentially is just a series of balls hitting other balls. Such that if you know the angle the first one hit, you can predict where every single one will be. Okay, let's assume that is true of the atoms in your body as well, right? And that the thoughts in your head are occurring, but they're not moving those, right? It's other things that are happening. So if we know where it was at the beginning of the Big Bang with a big enough computer, I can predict exactly where your body will be, what drugs will be inside of it, what dollar bills will be next to you 13 billion years later. That's the atomic lack of free will argument. The other one is you're assuming that we know directly what causes wealth, right? And clearly, one of the things that connects to it, as Ben said, is the financial position of your parents, the love that you received. But what we can't account for is every single interaction that person had throughout their whole life with every animal, creature, object, teacher, etc., that put them inexorably on a path towards whatever.
Using their poverty and their rough childhood as fuel to motivate them to do something great or create wealth or become successful.
Yes. And so if you find this unsatisfactory, what I really recommend, rather than going into it, because we've talked about it a lot, is to read Free Will by Sam Harris. It's not very long, and that will cover a lot of the questions, because essentially I'm not arguing that rich parents create rich people or that you can't search. I'm arguing that there's no free will. That and that is even bigger claim than the parents thing.
And if you hate the arguments that you find, so did I. But I haven't yet heard why it's wrong, as much as I wish to, and will continue to search to.
Well, so and one of the things that I'll ask you to do in that book is you can go, okay, well, I could go, if I say pick one or two or pick right or left, and you go, okay, I got it. Well, what made you pick right in this case? Was it all the time? Like, was that a free choice? Like, you could have said left, but what made you pick left? Well, I thought right. And then the fact that I thought right because I was told when I was little that I, always fake once or twice, but I've played this game before. So I know that. So it was all the sum of your past experiences.
And it's happening unconsciously.
And it's happening unconsciously. And even if you're conscious of it, that doesn't mean that you're controlling it. Like I could be conscious of a movie screen and have no control over what happens on it. So even if you watch these mechanisms play out, what you will find is that free will almost just vanishes into thin air as you start to examine it, and you imagine like the causal chain of why you're doing one thing versus another. And it's scary, man. It's not fun. What else?
I remember you guys have said body language plays a huge role in human interactions and can even so much as supersede a language barrier. But in times of all this online activity, it seems that I'm struggling with the semantics of words I use all the time. Do you have any sources that you use to become more eloquent in your everyday vocabulary?
I actually had a friend growing up who was like a walking thesaurus. He was incredibly good at knowing all the different ways to say something. And he would use really big words all the time to seem smart. And people really disliked him for it. And so I would caution, I guess, or pick a definition for eloquent that is going to get you the result that you want. Because I don't think the best thing to do is just pick the biggest word or even the most precise word every time. And so given that, I would just find people that you find charismatic and hang out with them or watch them on TV, and you'll start to subconsciously adopt their language. I saw this when I would go to camp in the Midwest, and I'd come back with a slight Midwest accent. Like, you just can't help but osmosis the way people speak around you. That's why people from the same town tend to have the same kind of accent. So that's what I would do. But I think that there's not necessarily virtue or additional charisma in eloquence in the sense of using the biggest word possible all the time. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's good, but...
Yeah. I did a video a while back. I think it's called Trump versus Brand, Donald Trump versus Russell Brand, Power of Word Choice. Check that out. I discuss Donald Trump's strategy versus Russell Brand's strategy, where they're each useful, and come to similar conclusions that Ben said. And what I would determine is, what is your goal? There was a period of time, I don't do it anymore, where every sentence I said, I would try to switch throughout the day. I'd be like, okay, for the next hour, I'm going to do single syllable words.
Really?
Yeah.
I didn't know this. In
Medellin. I was like, I'm going to try to say everything I can with 1 to 2 syllable words max.
Huh.
And it's a good practice.
And then you'd switch to just as many syllables per word as
possible.
and
then I was like, I just want to be precise. Now I'm going to try to be as, that's what longer words allow you to do, is they allow you to be more precise. Single syllable words like Donald Trump, oh, he's a strong guy. It's like, what do you mean he's strong? Like, you know what I mean? Like that is such a, and again, here I go. You could say amorphous, or you could say broad, right? and they might have different ideas. Broad is limited, amorphous is not. So that can be a fun little game to play. But more importantly, I would just listen to funny people and pick up on funny word choices. Because as far as charisma matters, I think you're better off listening to a Theo Von who just has these funny turns of phrase that you can just steal, and you'll see more bang for your buck in a charisma aspect by just being like, the dark arts, just steal his phrases. They're not bigger or more precise, but they're just funnier, which I think counts for more.
I saw this with I got a massage the other day, and it was interesting because the guy, often people will just like make comments, but the guy said you're built like a prize fighter, which I'd never heard before. It was just a random word. It's not like the biggest word or even the most precise word, but it was just unique. And I liked him so much more than if he had used all of the words I've heard before. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's funny because we teach that, and I know that, and I have tried to do that, and I've seen that when I deliver compliments. But this was just one of the first times where someone had talked to me about myself in a way that was like something I hadn't heard before. And it was cool because it immediately resonated with me. It's like, I like this person more. And then I felt myself do that. I was like, oh, damn, it really does work.
Yeah. Specificity and compliments, baby.
Next isn't the fact that one is charismatic determined by the notion that one is better than the average person's level of charisma? So in this shrinking market where theoretically everyone is charismatic, doesn't this mean no one is charismatic? To me, it resembles the idea of etiquette. The guy who is smooth and tells great stories gets ahead because others like him can't. But if everyone is hypothetically charismatic, then charisma itself means nothing.
Yeah.
I understand the universal applicability of making people not feel shitty about themselves and having confidence, but not the universality of charisma.
But you nailed it. I think confidence is not a zero-sum game in the sense that everybody's confident. They all feel good. The world is better, and that's fantastic. But yeah, if everyone is Chris Pratt levels of funny, then who gets the job at Guardians of the Galaxy? Like, you got to be next level. So that's a fair point.
I wonder what is the takeaway, and therefore don't.
Well, no, it was I had mentioned at one point, I said at some point you want to have taught so many people what you can do that the market shrinks. And I think this was just coming up. Well, if you teach so many people,
what will happen is
you will have destroyed the value of charisma, and it will evolve.
No, it'll evolve.
Yeah, and more people will need. Yeah,
if everyone were Chris Pratt, there would be something else that became
a charisma arms race. Yeah, it's
but it's ever evolving. Like someone will always be considered charismatic. Yeah. Humor would change. If everyone was like Chris Pratt, suddenly there'd have to be something.
Well, this is.
I actually don't think we can like educate ourselves out of a job.
So I'm excited to talk. We're going to talk to Vosh in a week or two, and he's, I think, very big into egalitarianism and equality. And there seems to be such like fundamental issues with equality, which is humans bucket, resist it, struggle against it in every action that we take, is to like stand above, be superior, distinguish ourselves, have advantages for ourselves, our loved ones, and our children.
Oh, I think it's pretty well established that making $100,000 in a neighborhood of people who make $70,000 will make you happier than making $1 million a year in a neighborhood of people that all make $10 million a year. Like, you'll just look around in the smallest mansion with the worst luxury car and feel inadequate versus having like
that's his argument for egalitarianism is shrink the pyramid. I mean, I don't know that he would say this, but you could make the argument everyone has less, but we're closer together and better off for it.
Well, yeah. Well, I'll just talk to him. But what I'm saying is I think people will, like, as soon as you distribute it, let's say you took all of the money in the world and you aggregated it and then distributed it to every human on the planet equally, humans would then immediately start to try to gain their lead or to gain a new lead. Like, everyone would be like, okay, we all just have $17,000 US because we gave it to people in India, China, Russia, the US, and everyone has $17,000
Our assets
cash.
have been distributed.
That's it. And everyone has the same size plot of land. Okay, now let's all just start. I think everyone would just be like, cool, let's start a race to see.
Do you know how awesomely important charisma would be in that world? do you realize that personality in that world, like, obviously physical attributes are going to matter, but charisma is going to just jump to the front of the line, because the first thing that people are going to try to do is, who am I going to pair up with? Who am I going to sleep with? And in that world, like, well, you're not going to flaunt your money. You're not going to flaunt your car. You can't flaunt your achievements or your ability to achieve, because in this world, we're just going to take it from you at some point and give it to everybody else. So you better be hilarious. But then what do we try to, this is the thing. Can you create a world without have-nots? It seems that the basic freedoms that we want are to create have-nots. And this is where I fall, and I want to discuss it. Like, so what you want to do is raise the floor, because you're going to have have-nots. What you would like for those have-nots is to not starve to death, not be in just horrible suffering. But there's still going to be people that are not picked by a mate, that are not liked by most, that are not all of these things. And you can't create a system, as long as humans remain, our consciousnesses haven't merged, that seems to account for that.
Yeah. I'm going to start that conversation with just questions. Just what's your...
where do you stand?
Well, no, tell me, pick the system, set it up. How should things operate?
Yeah. I've watched quite a bit, so I can give you some pointers before we get going, but yeah, it'll be fun.
Well, no, because my question is, okay, so let's say that everybody gets to 17,000 and then someone gets struck by an illness, and so then they had to use some of their 17,000. Do we redistribute again? Everybody in the country or on the planet is all paying for that medical bill? Or is it just okay,
I don't think first off, I don't think he's redistributing 17,000, but I do think that
I'm not saying he is. I just don't understand how it works. Is it reallocated minute by minute for equal wealth? Is it once a year?
There is a huge push towards equality of outcome. There's a large push for equality of outcome, and there is the belief that people who don't want, I don't know if this is the belief, but that is the metric. You're either unequal or you're equal.
So you get $100,000, I get $100,000. I spend a lot of my money on hookers and blow. You buy gym equipment and food, and it turns out that I've spent way more than you. So now you have 90 of your 100 left, and I have 20.
And you get...
Am I just okay?
You go to a hospital.
No. Just you have 90 grand in savings, and I have 20 grand in savings. Am I let's equalize? At the end of the week, am I just equal outcomes?
I think essentially, and I don't know what he's going to say, so we'll just talk to him, but there are government programs that facilitate that. Yes. There's not.
So there's it from you again.
There's never an initial leveling. To be clear, there's never an initial. You have 100. You have 100. But what there is consistently is,
I guess I don't know.
An attempt to lower the roof and raise the floor and bring people closer together.
Is he pro socialism or pro communism?
Socialism.
Okay.
Socialism.
I'll watch his videos ahead of time,
so
I know what his beliefs are.
Yeah. Cool. And by the way, if any of you out there want to become very charismatic, you can check out Charisma University, which I highly recommend. Charisma University is a step-by-step curriculum with a daily action guide, so there's no guesswork when it comes to learning the charisma habits. You just follow the guide and you get the results in 30 days. There's also a 60-day refund period for any reason, which means that you can really decide if the course is worth it to you. And the best way to describe the course is just to let the members speak for themselves. The first one comes from a guy who got promoted to a senior position early in his career. And he says, I don't even have a bachelor diploma, yet they want me to fill this position, and when asked why, this was the answer. You have great social skills, which is rare for an engineer. You can think quick on your feet, and you are open and self-assured in your demeanor. Thank you so much for all that you've taught me. You have truly changed my life, because without CU, I wouldn't have qualified for that position in a million lifetimes. Now, this next one comes from another person who started a new job, saying, I wanted to let you know that I nailed those first days at work. Everything that I needed was right there at the right moment. The confidence, the energy, the smile, the positive mindset, and all with your tips from last Tuesday in mind, it could just not go wrong. And he finishes by saying, I just wanted to emphasize that what I did the previous days would not even have come to my mind if I had not discovered that charisma is a skill that can be learned thanks to your YouTube channel and university program. And this last one is a comment in the course from someone who used it mainly to improve their social and dating life. And he says, life-changing. In 6 weeks, I went from being socially awkward with few friends to the life of every event I attend. I also went from having serious girl problems to dating the girl of my dreams. Charisma University transformed me from a lonely introvert hoping to better connect with people to an energy-filled extrovert who makes new friends everywhere I go. And there are more success stories just like those in the comments if you decide to join the course.
It seems your guys' growth is catapulted by having each other to bounce ideas off and share experiences with. Do you think such growth is possible as a lone individual? For example, do you think you could have gone to Brazil off on your own individual will to change your surroundings, or was it only possible due to offloading some of the courage with others in the group? More simply, is life a game that can be played adequately in single-player mode? If not, how do you go about forming such deep bonds provided you don't have friends you've known for double-digit or even just 5+ years?
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, it definitely helps. I think it definitely helps. And one of the things that we did was build that community ourselves. We started out, I read the 4 Hour Work Week. It said, you should please read this. We said, we're going to move to Brazil and start a business. Then we said it to everyone. And we ended up with 9 people that moved to Brazil with us.
Yeah.
One of them was someone I had spoken to for an hour.
Yeah.
So he moved to New York by himself. Charlie and I were teaching a class on how to talk to women, I think, and he paid to come to the class. So he's by himself in a new city, paying to go to meetups and classes that he's interested in, and afterwards comes up to us. We have a program that we offer, a coaching program, right? And he says, I have no interest in this, but I just paid to do this because I want to spend more time with you guys. So at that point, I'd spoken to him for 3 minutes, right? He comes, he has literally no interest in the program, so doesn't bother like talking to any women, but just is kind of chatting with the other people that are there and chatting with you and I. And at the end, we say, hey, you wanted to come hang out. We didn't really get a chance to hang out because we were coaching so much. So do you want to go get food since you literally just paid us to get to know us and you didn't yet? Talk to him and then was like, you seem awesome. You should come to Brazil. So that guy managed to jump into a community in about an hour. So you don't need the double digit years of friendship.
And the counterpoint to that is, I mean, Ben and I were best friends in high school, but we had a third friend who was very much like part of that group who opted out.
I've known him since I was 6.
Yes.
So I met Charlie when I was 15. I met this guy when I was 6. And the three of us were as close as friends could be at 23, 24, 25 when this started to happen.
Yeah. And he opted out, which is to say, having that friend is neither a fully necessary thing, as exemplified by your first example, nor is it sufficient to make it happen. You've got to choose to do these sorts of things. And by the way, these things are, this is, I think, where you're headed, is like, make the move, declare that you're going to do something bold, big, teach the class, move abroad, whatever, start talking about that. And that will attract people to you. And unfortunately, we're still really good friends with this guy, but like some people will not come along for the ride.
Yeah. But no, I think having a community is incredibly helpful. I was willing to move as long as I had just Charlie moving with me. I didn't need all 9, but I don't know if I would have done it if it were just me. Who knows? So I understand completely where you're coming from. And I would say if I had an interest in doing that, quitting my job, moving to another country, starting a business, and I had no friends that were excited about it, one, I would try to take them on the path that got me excited. So rather than go and convince them myself, I'd be like, just please read the 4-Hour Work Week. And I would just try to get my 20 closest friends to be like, I'm begging you, I'm putting all my goodwill on the line, read this book. And then if all of them were disinterested, I would start going to meetups for entrepreneurs, meetups for personal development, whatever it is that you're into, and get around like-minded people and then start talking to them about how, right now I'm a consultant, or right now I'm an accountant, or right now I'm a plumber, but my dream is to quit my job at the end of the year. Let's say it's December. I'm going to quit my job at the end of 2021 and I'm going to move to Brazil. And I'd start going to every meetup and everything. And I'd start saying that to people hey, what are you doing? This is my dream. This is my dream. And someone's eyes will light up. Someone will perk up. And that's your first potential person.
Yeah.
See if you like them, if you get along, keep in touch with that person. That's how I would do it. I would just go to these like-minded meetings and I would just make sure everyone that I met that I hit it off with understood my goal was at the end of the year, move to Brazil to start a business.
Or yeah. So actually, one of the things that I was remembering is I probably wouldn't have gone to Brazil alone, but I would have gone to Indonesia. I remember we were applying for scholarships to this Indonesian college, and I know that I went abroad alone. So in reflection, I wouldn't have gone to a brand new city with no plan, with no friends. But what you might do if you're not there is like find a program, and Ben's talking about meetups, but there's also these colleges that you can study at abroad and these sort of various things.
There's a program for entrepreneurs that travel the world together. It's meant to solve this problem. They group 30 people together, and then you get a guide, a counselor, whatever you want to call it. But everyone's in their 20s basically, or maybe 20s and 30s, and you go from city to city together. So you'll go to Argentina for 2 weeks or a month. You'll go to Rio, then you'll go to France, then you'll go. Yeah, this exists if you have the money.
It's expensive, I bet, and it sounds like a hell of a lot of fun. But
yeah, my sister almost worked there. I can try to get the name of it if you remind me, Justin. But if not, people should be able to Google this.
Yeah.
There are programs for nomadic entrepreneur dreams, but you don't have the crew to do it. They give you the crew.
Yeah.
And
then you try to find the one person that is like your bro or your gal.
Well, no, that's a good point, because I don't know if I would have moved to Brazil by myself, but yeah, certainly if I had the money, pay $30,000 to go with 30 people and travel the world, and I know they're all entrepreneurs, and I'm not going to be alone.
Yeah.
So that's easy. Yeah, we do that.
Yeah, we did that. I mean, there was a study abroad,
Yeah. And then you just got to build a business that can make you 30 grand. So you can afford the program.
Cool.
That's it for normal questions.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Unless we have a couple more now that we do for the podcast that we steal. But that's it for today. Hope you enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments if anything we talked about was stupid or fun or interesting. And we'll keep going. Peace.
Do we have a Patreon CTA we can just slap on the end, or?
I could say it if you want. Do you want me to say thanks, everybody?
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. This podcast is sponsored by, as we mentioned, Kettle and Fire. They're huge. Thank you so much, Justin, and everyone at Kettle and Fire. That's kettleandfire.com/Charlie and Ben, or C_B. That's important. It's Charlie and Ben, but with the ampersand. When you go to checkout, you get a discount on your bone broth. Stay healthy, keep the protein. But also, if you'd like to support us directly, consider joining Patreon. We're going to go answer a bunch of patron questions. We still answer them all, and that's what we're going to shoot right now. So if you'd like to join at any dollar amount, we can get your question answered. It's still...
Yeah, then you don't have to be at the whim of Justin. If
Justin,
you comment on YouTube,
can't cut you.
You're at the whim of Justin. But if you're a patron for our Patreon, then you get your question answered, guaranteed.
Yes. So if you'd like to join or just support the podcast, we'd massively appreciate it.
Yep.
And we're
You
gonna
guys, thank you. You guys make this possible.
Yeah, you're cool. So on to the patrons. Take care, everybody.